Just give me 1 second. I fucked this up. Shut up.
Did he knock over a chair, or what happened?
It's
apparently he doesn't know how to open a wine bottle.
Hey, listen, it's my fucking fault. Like, it's my fault the cork fucking crumbled by me looking at it too long. Like, it's like those... the fucking...
Oh, God.
No, I'm sorry. What you were saying?
I was just going to say, all those fucking wine mom TikTok videos showing you how to, like, hit it against a tree to pop the cork out, and you're fucking it up.
Honestly, to be fair, the cork, like, from what I'm seeing, it kind of just disintegrated as he tried to put the corkscrew in.
Yeah, I breathed on the cork, and it whittled away like a slug under the salty sun.
Even, like, the attempt to fix it was just the cork wanted to break more, but it's good, it's fine.
I'm gone for literally 20 seconds, but I'm right here.
All right. You know, it's funny how Green mentioned wine moms on TikTok. I find it fascinating how, like, there's like witch talk.
I avoid TikTok and most social media. Like, it's going to make me sick.
And there's like...
It usually does.
Well, there are like... the same way there are corners of Twitter, there are corners of TikTok. So there's like a corner of TikTok inhabited by mostly witches. There's a corner of TikTok that is like... So evidently wine moms have their own corner of TikTok where it's like, I'm still relevant. And in all due respect, it's a little sad to see like women in their 30s and 40s doing like the kind of dance moves and routines you expect. Like, I was mentioning before, like when you were gone, like there are corners of TikTok.
I heard you, man.
Okay. So like you see. In all due respect, grown-ass women doing the kind of dance moves you expect a 17-year-old girl to do to get the attention of like dudes in their mid-20s, and it's
yes.
You see that kind of behavior in like a woman who, like, let's say she married young and then she divorces her husband and then she's in her early or mid-30s and she's still doing the same dance moves she did when she was single and in college, and like complete with the fucking Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld dancing and hot wine breath just hitting your face like a fucking cloud of like stink. Like it's so there's an outlet for that on TikTok, and evidently I didn't get the wine lessons, so I'm sorry, Green, okay? I'm sorry I let you down.
It's okay. It's funny you mentioned the witch talk.
Wine, so.
No, which is the worst thing ever because it always floats back into the hole when you try to pour it.
I just don't want to drink cork.
No, you don't. I have a very weird feeling about the witch talk people and people like that. Yeah. Where my whole thing is, I think introducing, pre-rational streams of thought and alternative conceptions of reality back into the culture, I think that is what needs to happen. But then I look at those people and I go, oh, when I talk about mushrooms, a significant portion of the population lumps me in with the witch talk teenager people. And it feels like a bit of an uphill battle.
Well, part of it is because that's the only frame of reference they know. But on the other hand, if you'll allow me to be slightly caustic and bitter about this.
Oh, please.
I feel that once we hit... okay, there are a number of running themes in mumbo-jumbo times, all right? And that's what we live in, mumbo-jumbo times. Like, words mean things. Words mean things was beaten with pipes and chains, set on fire, wrapped up in a Persian rug, and thrown off a roof, all right? Like, that whole words mean things being, like, found in a ditch by the highway, that's part of the reason why we're here. Like, so... another theme of mumbo jumbo times is existential pillars in people's lives have been eroding. So in the absence of these, they seek to imprint onto something else. For some people, it's like political ideology or like a socio-political movement. Why do you think so many dudes lately, and even women, have like been converting to Catholicism and the Orthodox Church en masse?
That's been weird. That's been an odd one.
But that's because people are desperately seeking something greater than themselves because that is hardwired in us as human,
Maybe I'm seeing a weird side of it, though, because like the people I know who got into witchcraft recently, at the very least, I try not to get involved in that stuff, right. And I'm very anti-spiritual, anti-religion, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But they always tend to not like major religions. They almost hate them. And then they end up like wrapping back around where you can't believe in a normal God that everyone believes in for, reasons. One touches the kids, and one they chop the heads off of people. So I now believe in old pagan gods instead, which still have nothing to add to your life. But I guess it plays into the whole I can drink tea and act like I'm doing witchcraft. I can burn incense, and that's warding away evil spirits that don't exist.
Well, it gives them a sense of community. It gives them a sense of belonging. It fosters in-group, out-group thinking. And but herein lies the problem. You have a bunch of ugly, gross ham galaxies and rainbow-haired manic pixie dream girl butter golems beating their Bushwick apartment walls with burning sticks of sage. Listen, if you want to talk about witchcraft,
I've been in those apartments.
Dude, if you want to talk about witchcraft, for starters, all right, there are witches in places like Salem, Massachusetts. You could go to parts of the British countryside and find, the descendants of, people and where, witchcraft and sorcery has been around for centuries. You know what? Go to the fucking South Bronx and find someone who practices Santeria or Palo Monte. Because, you see, these systems of worship, you're ordained and you learn under someone, and it is passed down through oral tradition because these things thrived under secrecy because being exposed was punishable by death, in countries around the world, you're accused of sorcery? Shit, we gotta stone you to death to make things right. So now you have this weird, watered-down, astroturfed version of that where it's I did a cleansing, don't touch me, I'm gonna burn sage and beat the wall. And
I never really thought about that, because I've seen other religious groups where you have to pass down the knowledge from someone who's better learned than you are in it.
You have to be ordained. You have to be sworn in.
You can go on Google and become a pagan or a witch.
That's so you see this form of witchcraft. The reason women turn to it is because
easy.
One, it's easy. Two, it provides it fosters a sense of belonging and in-out group thinking. Three, the erosion of existential pillars. And show me a witch, and I'll show you a woman that doesn't have a healthy relationship with her father, or didn't have some weird hang-up, or even though she never went without, she's still lashing out. Because, you know what it's like, Green? I've always wanted to film a 1-minute movie where a guy's trying to get through to his daughter, and he's but honey, stay inside. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way. You don't understand, Dad. What I'm just trying, but I love you. Why are you yelling at me? Because racism, Dad. That kind of show me a witch and I'll show you a woman that did some version of that at some point in her life to some family member, most likely her dad. It's so gross and just unbecoming of the times we live in. So thank you for letting me be bitter and cynical, Green, okay?
Okay, that's fine. I will say to the viewers or listeners, to be clear, we did not come here with the intention of attacking witches as a social group. That was just an organic development. Just if there are any witches in the audience, I will actually say
I have no problem with witches either. I just think it's hilarious that people are circling back to paganism because they don't want to deal with modern religion. I just think that's hilarious.
Yeah, kind of like how we're circling back to emojis as hieroglyphics 2.0 because we just don't want to be bothered with language.
Yeah,
we don't want about language. I will say I have a bit of a complex relationship with magic, which is a very strange sentence to say in public, but over the past year where I have I've gotten into the psychedelic thing, I think it's extremely important. It's a framing thing. It's arguably the main force in my life, at least narratively with where I'm going.
Yeah.
And a thing about psychedelics is you learn about the other esoteric communities that are kind of adjacent to it. And so last year, I actually got a book recommendation from Don in his comments because I asked about it. For the book The Occult by Colin Wilson, which is a history of Western esotericism, magic in the West.
Yeah.
And you learn things, and there's this intersection point with all we're talking about where a running through line in magic is the importance of language, the idea that reality has multiple levels of organization, and the idea that there's something enchanted in the way we interact with our surroundings that intersects with language and our mental models of what is going on in an important way. I look at magic. Yeah, I look at magic in an interesting way where it's so frustrating because it's so easy to draw pentagrams on your floor and prance around naked and tell stories about how the devil came in you and his cum was icy cold and it froze to your labia. It's so easy to do that. And I think a lot of the people doing that, they just see it as an aesthetic or a metaphor they don't really believe. But when you learn about these people, and also my experiences with psychedelics and trying to figure out what those mean, it really feels like even if most of the people in these movements are idiots, they're brushing up against something that is vital and real. And you brought up a language. Our inability to grasp with what language is and what we're doing with it, that seems very central to everything that is fucking us up right now. And even if it doesn't, and even if it's not too helpful, like the magic world, the history of it, there were people who had ideas where they really were trying to figure that shit out. Go.
Listen, just real quickly, in regards to language and magic, I would go so far as to say that prayer is a form of incantation. Like, in fact, like, all right, take the Orthodox Church, all right, Greek Easter, all right? There are certain prayers that are only said on that day of that month of that part of the year and no other time, because it is to commemorate this specific thing that we have built a religion around, according to the Greek Orthodox Church. Like, and not just in the Orthodox Church, in Islam, in fact, in Judaism, all right? So the baby has no sex until 40 days into pregnancy. So there are specific prayers for the intent of, dear God, please bless me with a son.
That's cute.
There are specific prayers for specific. You can't just wing it. Like, I understand. You sit around the table, you say grace, and you say the things you're grateful for. But there are prayers. Like, why do you think there have been prayers in organized religion that have gone untouched for hundreds of years? And if organized religion works...
For now.
For now. All right. So if organized religion is revolved around that precept, it only makes sense that any systemic practice of like the occult or witchcraft follows the same thing. But again, it is passed down orally. Like, take Santeria, for example, okay? The fucking slaves were brought over from the western part of Africa to Latin America, okay? So the conquistadors realized, geez, we wiped out 90% of the locals. We need some good slave labor. I know where to get some slave labor. So they get them from West Africa. So the slaves that land in Latin America, the conquistadors make them play this game. Instead of win, lose, or draw, it's run, convert, or die. So
I've heard of that.
So take the Yoruba pantheon, for example, okay? It fit like hand in glove that, we're having Catholicism pushed onto us. Oh, look at fucking Saint Barbara and Chango. Like, they have the same colors, the same sacred number, the same reoccurring items of power in their origin story, and they're both like red and white, fire, thunder, lightning, wrath. Fuck yeah. So they then sort of like overlapped Catholicism onto their pre-existing practice. So in a way, it allowed them to practice openly, but kind of semi in secret. So now if you go to Cuba today, or anywhere in Latin America, from the northern tip of Mexico to the southern tip of Chile, and everywhere in between, bless you, there's some form of, like in Jamaica, it's Obia. In Haiti, it's Voodoo. In the Caribbean, it's Santeria, all right? Every part of Latin America has something that resembles this. So all of these traditions were passed down orally, and guess what, Green? The same prayers that were formulated hundreds of years ago are the same prayers you're going to hear today if you walk into a Santero's house, even though there's no grand unifying church of Santeria. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now, on top of that, something the occult, I believe, is of very great importance is how it shines a light on the reoccurring characters in the pantheons you see in every, like, culture. Like, there's always the fucking workaholic blacksmith who lives in the woods that forges items of power for the rest of the fucking superhero cast. There's always the messenger who could traverse between planes of existence. There's always the goddess of fertility, you know? There's never a god of fertility, it's always a goddess of fertility. And the goddess of fertility is almost always associated with, like, the moon and the ocean where life began, you know? Because, you know, fertility and a woman bringing life into the universe, ipso facto, yada, 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 give peace a chance, ashes to ashes, turn, turn, turn. There's always, like, someone who represents the sun. There's always the Hierophant who takes you by the hand to wherever it is you end up once you expire in meat space. So, like, the three hags, or like in Santeria, there are these three sisters that one resides at the gate of the cemetery, Oya. One, her domain is the open grave, Obanani. And the other one, her domain is, like, where the coffin lies when it's lowered under the earth, Yawa. So that mirrors the three hags, fucking three women sitting at the base of the tree of life in Norse mythology. And because they're hung up with death too, every thread they put into the tapestry is a life introduced to mankind, and every thread they burn or close off is a life lost. So, like, there are all these reoccurring themes that I believe that if you do research, or if you have a meaningful trip and think about things for like 9 hours straight, you too can come to these conclusions. Like,
definitely with a trip. Because I've found myself reading plenty of stuff where, I mean, there's always an interesting connection, especially if you go far back enough. Every, like, early civilization came up with very similar things.
Yes.
But usually it has to do with drugs to some extent.
Yeah.
You see the same shapes, you come to the same conclusions. I can imagine cavemen at some point just eating magic mushrooms and learning what the wheel was.
Right.
All over the world.
Like, because, like, whether it's in Arizona or ancient Babylon, motherfuckers drew, like, human-shaped looking stick figures with dots around it and the spiral. Everywhere you go, you're going to find that in one form or another.
We also learned that the sun and lightning was scary and powerful, and being put under the earth was terrifying and deadly. So going underground is death, and the sun above is empowering and life-giving.
Right.
It's funny you bring that up. The whole thing about drugs and ancient drugs potentially being the progenitor forces in all religion. It's weird. Basically, everyone who does psychedelics comes to either suspect that or be really open to the possibility.
Yeah,
because
well,
the shit. Yes, it does. And part of the thing with the
how did the whole planet come to the same conclusion? I don't know. What's the connecting factor here? Everyone was mad high.
All right,
yeah, there you go.
That's probably the. It's actually a weird one. Bring up. Well, I guess you didn't, but you know the ancient Greek mysteries, the rites at Eleusis.
Yes, but give a TLDR to the ladies and jerks at home listening.
Well, for a very long time in ancient Greece, there was this, actually people don't really know what it was, but there was an island called Eleusis where everyone who went there did something. Every time they did it, it was a transformative experience, which was treated as an ancient, sacred, mystical rite. Any person could go there, a slave or a citizen, a general, an emperor, whoever, well, I guess no emperor. Anyone could go there and do this. We don't know what it was, but you could not tell anyone after you did it. And a really key moment is much later. I think it was Alcibiades. There was this controversial shithead from ancient Greece. He got charged with having the Eleusinian mysteries in possession in his home when it was supposed to be kept at the sacred site. So that has caused massive, massive suspicion that it was a psychedelic substance.
Whoa.
And hilariously, one of the top contenders is there are lots of sister molecules to LSD, which can be created from certain funguses and things like that.
So they were probably eating like moldy bread that made them trip fucking hard.
Yeah, well, stews made out of moldy wheat is one of the things. And a funny thing about that I really relate to, my first drug experiences were with a very obscure drug called LSA, which is one of those
morning glory seeds.
Yeah, I used wood rose, but yes, same thing. And hilariously, I learned about that later, and it's like, oh fuck, my first psychedelic experiences were using one of the very similar chemicals to like this ancient Greek mystery thing, and I was just like strutting around my house being like, I am an ancient Greek philosopher now. That is who I am.
I hope you committed fully and made a toga out of your fucking blanket, and you had like the gallant stride of Socrates himself.
Well, not totally. The blanket thing, kind of, because the weird thing about LSA is LSD, it's a big wonky molecule that hits the dopamine receptors, so it's kind of a stimulant, but not like a real stimulant. Yeah. LSA doesn't do that, so it actually almost puts you to sleep. So you kind of just so lounging around in a trance is kind of how you do LSA. So yes, blankets were involved at many points.
A friend of mine took a trip on LSA, and he had a ridiculously like vivid dream that he remembers every single detail of. And I was told this story that like everyone was just like, he was like at a party, and like a friend of his was like, hey, like you want some of this? And he was like, all right. And he falls asleep, and everyone is just standing in a circle around this guy who's like asleep but like doing running motions. And like he ends up waking up, and he was like, first like something was chasing me, and then I became the thing that was chasing something else, and I saw lifetimes of shit unfold in really, really specific detail. I even smelled it, and everyone was like, dude, what the fuck were you on?
That's a good question, because not a lot of people know about LSA.
Right.
This is my first time hearing about it.
Well, a lot of the people, LSA is kind of stigmatized because many teenagers have had their first psychedelic experience by going to the hardware store, getting morning glory seeds, and grinding it up into yogurt or something like that.
I'm really happy I live in New York City, where I could just get acid and mushrooms very easily.
Yeah.
And another thing about LSA, it's weird in a few ways. One thing, it causes almost no visual hallucinations, which it's very rare for a psychedelic to do that, which you would know. And the other thing, it has a really bad side effect, and it causes a vasoconstriction. So it makes your stomach scrunch up, and it causes a stiffness and tightness and pain in your legs, and it's hard to breathe. So people who start with LSA, you pay up front. LSA, a thing about LSA though that is very unique. I don't know if everyone experiences this. It seems to be common. When LSA hits about 2 hours after you take it, you have a rush of physical bodily euphoria, and that's the thing about LSA. It's much more body centric. Where LSD, I haven't taken it, but people who've taken both will say LSD is much more cerebral. LSA is much more in your body. LSA is very tactile, and it hits with a wave of euphoria so fucking powerful that it's like nothing I've ever felt. I tried to take fucking notes my first time tripping with LSA with Series of Trip.
Good luck.
It was 5 pages of random letters because I felt like I was coming out of my fingertips by using the keyboard.
Wow.
I couldn't stop myself because it felt so good.
I've heard people say similar things about stuff like ecstasy, like the fucking club kids I've hung out with.
Well, yeah, but that's cheating. Ecstasy's a fucking amphetamine.
I'm just saying.
I know you're saying
from the experience, because I've done like E, and I'm not a fan, but you know, if it's anything like that, then I have some understanding of what that.
Oh,
was
just real quickly, Green. Would you say it's like more body intensive in the sense that like, when you smoke weed, obviously behind your eyes, you're like, oh shit. And then when you smoke hash, for whatever reason, from the roof of your skull to like your fingertips and the base, like your body feel like, or like when you fuck with edibles or hashish, like your body is, for whatever reason, feels high as shit on top of whatever it is you're dealing with.
I hate that shit. I'm almost done with edibles because I'm tired of my body feeling terrible. Like, I can smoke copious amounts and have no fucking dry mouth. I eat a small amount of edibles and I'm like, fuck, I need like a half gallon of water every 20 minutes. I can't.
Oh, dude, I could tell you, I am terrified of edibles. I have a really fucking tricky relationship with marijuana in general because I have
So do I now.
I have such a hard time dosing appropriately. I always go straight from I don't feel it to literally in hell.
Yeah.
With nothing in between.
I'm there with you.
When I geared up for the psychedelic thing, you know, the thing I'm trying to write a book about, which I don't even want to talk about because that means I'll never do it for real. My period of life last year where I did this experiment where I holed up in my apartment and I just tried to fix my mental problems by doing drugs, alone in Seattle. I understand that's kind of a weird plan, but I had this period that I retroactively named my psychedelic summer.
And honestly, it sounds better than therapy to me. So
you're not. It's cheaper and sometimes more effective than therapy.
Do psychedelics and exercise for like a month and watch your like mental problems just disappear.
I mean, we can maybe get into that, but I became a completely new person, and I had been in and out of therapy for years, and I don't know if it did anything other than stabilize me by giving me someone to talk to.
Oh,
I really don't know.
I have opinions on therapy that I could share at a later point in time, but I walked out after my 7th session. That's I could leave it at that if you'd like.
I got through 5 my first time and was like, I'm good with this.
Yeah, I've never wanted to chew the face of a stranger off of their head, just more so than the man I sat across from for 7 fucking hours.
Maybe we just had bad therapists, because like my reaction to them was, when are you going to tell me something I don't already know?
Right.
Well,
it's just like, fucking, why are you telling me this in clinical terms, but like, oh, the definition is the thing I came to before I talked to you.
Yeah.
Like,
well, this oh, sorry.
Just real quickly, but before we start yelling about therapists, I just want to cover something real quickly, Green. Number one, so about that whole incantation and language thing, check this out. When I was a little kid, my dad's side of the family's from Greece, all right? So when I was a kid, went to Greece, like 5 years old, all right? Now, what really stood out to me is how in the Orthodox Church, it's not uncommon for monks to just live an ascetic life and kind of just do their own thing, but they're like kind of sanctioned by the Orthodox Church, if that makes sense. So like there was a monk who carved a fucking cave on the side of a mountain by hand, and people would go to him for like blessings or advice or like things like that. So, my brother and I were baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church because Greeks are an insane ethnocentric people whose identity revolves around language, food, hating Turkey, and the Orthodox Church. So,
yeah.
He took my brother and I to this man, Brother Baidusis, who lived up in the mountains of Marusi. And it kind of weirded me out because everyone like revered this guy, and I'm like, he looks like Gandalf in all fucking black. Like, he just looks like a dude I'd be getting quests from in an RPG. And like, so we're in this guy's cave. All he had was like a corner where he had all these like ikonas. Like an ikona is the 2D depiction of a saint in the Orthodox Church. Because, Catholics have statues and the Orthodox Church has 2D depictions. That's one of the differences. So he had a corner of his little cave, all these ikonas. He had a table and a chair and like a quill and ink. And he just had like a shelf with like dried bread and shit. And he basically lived hand to mouth. He was like God's lonely man, like Terry Davis, but without the computers. So I remember like I bumped into something and I said, "Oh, God damn it!" And he, as if like he teleported immediately in front of me.
Oh God.
Not literally, he just like in one step, now he's in front of me, and he said, "Don't say that, because when you talk, you release energy out into the world, and when you do so, you cannot take the Lord's name in vain with that energy." And like that always stuck with me.
That's awesome.
Like that always stuck with me because like if there was no inherent energy in words, then why have certain prayers have stayed the way they have for hundreds, if not thousands of years? Like I've always thought about that. But here's the thing. If I talk about this, I get lumped in with witch talk in the same way you talk about shrooms and you get lumped in with new age hippy dippy pyramid wearing on the head, oh wow, crystals, chakra, and energy man type bullshit. Like as soon as you start talking about this, you have to get labeled and then shoved into a shelf.
Sounds like do we burn the witches? Is that what we have to do?
We have to
burn the witches.
We have to start. We have to start at Bushwick. And we're starting in Bushwick.
Because if you don't burn the witches now, their granddaughters will post cringe on social media. That's how it works.
If you don't burn them now, they're going to revive Tumblr.
They'll come back in the future and they'll be on social media. You can't get away from them.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Keep going. I can hear you. Good. Yeah, you just need to
no talking, Munoxxus. Hanes said 1 second.
Yeah. He was right next to me. He didn't go far. He was like,
I took two steps to the left.
He had to get an ashtray.
But just one last thing, just about this, about religion and spirituality. I just want to cover this. This is something I feel is very important. You see, and the only reason I know about this is because I read it in a fucking Doctor Doom comic. All right, so different cultures have different ways of explaining the same thing. All right. And this made me realize, mind you, like, I thought about this on a trip where I was like, what if like 90% of life happens to everyone? Like, you're going to get cheated on. You're going to try your hardest and fail. You're going to watch people die. You're going to get sick. You're going to try your best and have nothing to show for it in something. You're going to fail upwards in life. You're going to have like friends become not friends, like you're gonna get double-crossed, all these other things. You will know heartbreak, you will know sorrow, you might spend a couple of evenings with your chin in your hand looking out the window at 4 a.m. wondering, why does life work for other people but not for me? You're 90% of life happens to everyone, and maybe the remainder 10% is how we deal with it, or how we express it, or how we try to convey it to others, you know?
That's a very pretty thought.
Because
I think there's some truth to that.
Well, because how is it that, like, all right, so the fucking Australian Aboriginals who were uncontacted for thousands of fucking zillions of years at some point realized, oh, there's Dreamtime, and Dreamtime overlaps the physical world, and if you influence something in the physical world, you influence something in Dreamtime, and vice versa. And that's probably the greatest, most concise explanation of magic I've ever heard of. However you want to call it.
The magic... Oh, fuck. Munoxxus, do you have any ideas here?
I just want to know what fucking Doctor Doom comic this came from.
The Fantastic... Check this out. So the Fantastic Four...
That was from Doctor Doom?
So the Fantastic Four is like, haha, Victor Von Doom, your Tibetan black magic is no match for my Reed Richards Combobulator 4000 Galactic Ray. And he's like, LOL, noob. I know like 7 other systems of practice. Come at me. And they were like... And then like he just like, oh, so like now you're immune to Tibetan black magic. Okay, Aboriginal Dreamtime. Have fun with that. So 17 issues later, the Fantastic Four make their way out the negative zone. All right? So that's...
It was just Dr. Doom flexing and being like, you can't stop any of this.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you're immune to necromancy? Illusion. Here you go. Have fun with that.
Okay.
I think you are completely right that so much of what humans do, because humans are biological adaptive systems. They are in a niche. Their evolution is in communication with each other. Not how much you want to argue is up for debate, but, you know, people's genes and their behaviors are reacting to other people. Everything falls into a sort of equilibrium. There's a pretty narrow channel that going down it will keep the game going and keep resulting in more humans being born who are able to survive in this world. Most of what we do, there's not that many options. It's just the little area where there are options and there are choices to be made. That's where all of our mind is directed towards. And so that's where we see all these huge variations.
I think some of the variations, I think some of the discrepancies have to do with geography. I think some of the discrepancies have to do with your surroundings, and like, because there's also the instance of set and setting, you know? However, I'd like to believe that like 90% of fucking, like most of humanity can agree that fart sounds are hilarious. It's great to watch people get kicked in the balls. There's a reoccurring theme of people in a pantheon that predates organized religion, and there are all these reoccurring archetypes. I'd really like to subscribe to the idea of what Jung proposed, the collective unconscious. Because before I found out about that, I used to think, like, what if there's like a universal frequency that like at some point people tapped into? And you know, when you're like conspiracy theory minded in your 20s, like you first discover like the Rotten Library and like Google, and then like, you know, don't you realize what they did to Kennedy, man? And like I used to think that like maybe like part of the reason we're in this like decades long fever dream is because like that universal frequency has been like muted. So now we're all just learning to swim in the ocean.
I was going to say, the closest thing I can even subscribe to as far as, like, I don't know, I guess the universal frequency, that's closer to what I believe in, just that the universe has a I don't know. We're all on a similar wavelength with things because we're all part of the same, fucking system. But I feel like it's being translated wrong by people, and I think that's why I've come to the conclusions of not liking spiritualism and religion in general. How did we all come to these different conclusions if we're on the same wavelength? It's very dangerous. Like that's I see religion and spiritualism as a very threatening thing to the species because we're going to keep butting heads until we can agree on the same thing.
Right.
And I think the easiest thing to agree on is don't understand this shit.
We're gonna keep butting heads until fucking Christ comes back. And if Christ does come back, like it's gonna be this world changing thing, and everyone's gonna be too busy going like tweeting, "Oh my God, Jesus is coming," and taking like footage of him on their cell phone instead of like embracing salvation.
We're gonna wait until Christ comes back, and he's never gonna come back, and we're gonna keep fucking butting heads until this imaginary character never comes back.
I will say this. I have thought many times, you know how, do you ever read an old religious text and there's something in it where it just fucking sticks with you?
Yep.
One of the stories in the Bible that never fucking left me was Lazarus and the rich man, where a rich man and Lazarus die, and the rich man is in hell looking up at Lazarus. And the rich man yells out saying, "Go tell my family that heaven and hell are real and they need to change their ways." And they shout down at the rich man, "It doesn't matter, because if the teachings of the old prophets did not sway them, then even if a man came back to life, it would not convince them." And I completely fucking believe if Jesus actually came back, or if a man was revived from the dead and said there is an afterlife, so many people would still find a way not to believe it.
Of course, especially nowadays.
Oh my God!
The people who are anti-Catholicism or just anti-religion, like myself, you could bring him back from the dead, and I'd be like, "Nah, I don't believe you."
They would invite him onto a talk show and argue with him about whether they would admit he's Jesus and admit he came back from the dead, but they would argue on whether or not he really knew what he was talking about.
And then there'd be somebody going like, "Well, don't you see the set is obviously a green screen?" And then there would be people in the audience who would be like, "No, that man's an imposter. I saw him in the parking lot." "No, you didn't. Like, I fucking teleported into the set. Didn't you just see me? You're a liar." And then and as long as there's like dissent, no one will. We all won't be on the same page.
Okay, this is a little off topic, but I recently, because I was talking with someone over my little birthday weekend about religion in general, and something about the thing about the Catholic Church specifically that bothers me, and maybe I'm crazy for thinking like this, but all right, so once upon a time, and we're just going to assume that all of this shit is real for the sake of the argument, right?
Right.
God sends someone to Earth and is like, "Here, my rules and regulations for life, just take them. This is what I said."
Are we talking Old or New Testament?
I mean, take it how you want, because no matter what, this is going to usurp that.
Okay.
God's like, "Here are my fucking rules," right? Cool. Just listen to these and you're good. Kingdom of Heaven's yours, right? Flash forward to today, and the Pope can be like, "Remember that one time when God, the almighty being who rules over everything, said no to gays?" And then he just scribbles it out and he's like, "Nah." Are you telling me that humans can just be like, "Fuck God"?
Well, my beef with the Catholic Church is that, all right, so Pope is a divinely appointed, you're appointed by fucking God to lead this, like, religion that you consider the one true religion, and a motherfucker quit that job. That there's something that I can't.
Oh yeah, we can go to that too.
I can't square that away. I can't.
So these people can just gnaw God's rules. They can go, "You know what? God appointed me. I'm out." They can completely go around their own rules and regulations. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And you're telling me that this is supposed to be believed in and supported, and like, no, go fuck yourself. The second someone went, God's rules are not they're not the same. They can be changed over time. Until God comes back and goes, "I'm changing the rules," you don't get to change those rules. Sorry.
No, just real quickly while we're on topic, like, no, this is important. This
is a flowing stream of water. Say whatever you want.
There's a comic called The Chronicles of Wormwood, all right, and it's written by Garth Ennis, if I'm not mistaken, and it basically portrays like the son of the devil, and he's on Earth, and his powers that like he could basically like make one wish true, like, and it could even be his own wish, like he can alter reality, and he hangs out with Jesus in a bar in Hell's Kitchen, and Jesus did come back, but he was at the 2000 World Trade Organization protests. He got hit by a cop with a nightstick, and now he's mentally disabled, and he's a black dude, and he just sits like in a fucking bar, just like, and it's the only person who knows is the devil's son. And the whole thing is ridiculous, and like part of the reason like the world has not rectified itself is because the Son of Man did come back,
and he got bludgeoned by a cop.
He got
Stop resisting.
Well, that happened in real life too. I mean, actual Jesus. That's basically what happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like Jesus got killed by the cops again in that story.
Well, in this one, he didn't get killed. He just got his skull beaten in and couldn't come out.
He didn't get killed in the first one either, did he, man?
Well, he was killed, and then he came back. But this version of Jesus never got a chance to be like, look, I'm Jesus.
I'm not like a fundamentalist Christian, by the way. Like, I'm complicated, but I'm not, yeah.
You can't cave in Jesus' head until he goes, look, I'm Jesus, here are some miracles, now you have a reason to believe me. Then you cave his fucking head in.
So, just real quickly.
But you gotta give him a chance.
He was punished Jesus. A son of man denied his chance.
I do like that the son of the devil hangs out with him, though.
No, it's such a good comic book, and the depiction of heaven is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And they're getting this like tour, and the tour guide is like they're walking him through like the grand lobby, and there's a guy giving away tickets to Bill Hicks opening up for Jimi Hendrix. And
oh my God!
There's this like old man in a tuxedo playing a banjo and singing, and there's like hundreds of like he's sitting near a fountain playing a banjo and singing, and there are like hundreds of people of all like races, ages, and colors and creeds just standing around listening to him. And the tour guide is like, yeah, just it ultimately boils down to if you're a good person. Like even Satanists and atheists end up here. Like they don't get it till they're here. It's not their fault.
I've always kind of wanted to write a story about the Antichrist coming to Earth. And, you know, the obvious mission is to destroy it, but he kind of gets bored because we're doing it to ourselves.
Right.
I would love to just... you're supposed to be out there destroying them, son. I don't have to. Look at what they do.
Oh, kind of like how he got so used to the game. Normal is now easy mode.
Well, it's just like, okay, he could be out here like making cars run through people and calling down meteors or moons a la Sephiroth, but just sitting there watching humans beat the shit out of each other because they have like weird biases.
It's like
he invents the modern dating situation.
Listen, Earth.
He makes Tinder, and he also starts racial bias all over again.
This guy
and just goes, "Have fun, guys."
This guy turns
Tinder,
Earth,
but the T is a pitchfork.
There you go.
This guy turns Earth into an R&D funnel of like hell directly into Earth. Just like he uses Earth as hell's R&D lab.
He's supposed to wipe everything out, but it's just so much easier to let them do it themselves.
I actually want to. That makes me think I should read that because I thought I was going to do a video on it, but I didn't. I read The Boys, the original comic for the
show,
Prime show.
The show, yeah.
Have you guys read that?
I've read some of it, not the entire. I mean, there's a lot of it though, so I haven't. Okay,
I've just real quickly. I've read some of it. Just disclaimer: I haven't seen the show.
I know a lot of the spoilers for the comics either way.
Yeah, well, everyone posted them on fucking Twitter, but okay, we don't need to get into it. But The Boys, the comic.
I looked it up so I could know if the show to comic was any good. You know.
Oh fuck no. We don't have to get into
to see.
I have an abandoned script. I think the whole thing is, actually, fuck it. No, I'm erasing that. We can get into The Boys another time.
Just real quickly about the Chronicles of Wormwood. God is a senile old man who cannot stop jerking off, and so his attention is diverted. He can't, everything is going unanswered on Earth because he's busy. All right. He's not ignoring our prayers. He's just occupied. That's kind of the explanation you're given.
The truly wise man would pray for God to jerk off.
The wiser man would pray for him to stop.
Okay.
Dude, he has not stopped, and he doesn't look like he's stopping anytime soon. The comic is kind of wild because you also got a glimpse into hell. And it's fascinating because you're taken through a journey of what it's like to end up in hell. So this guy dies, and there's this little girl right before him, and he's in his office, and you see him go through this rehearsed script as if what he says to little children before he does something terrible to them. And this is going according to the script. But then you're seeing it camera B from behind the girl, and there's this gigantic maw with teeth and tendrils coming out from the center of it, slowly coming out, and it grabs a hold of him, and when he realizes it, he looks around and he's in hell. And it is one of the ugliest and most terrifying things I've seen in a long time. And then comes Satan himself, and he is walked in on this gigantic golden platform, carried and propped up by generals and warlords and ghouls in suits. It's amazing. You have to read this, Green. It's such a good comic book.
You actually probably are selling me on this because I do want to learn more about Garth Ennis because The Boys was so good. It was such a fucking smart piece where it was not as tight as the show, but it was so much better in the fucking ideas and what it really had. Like Garth Ennis, reading The Boys, it made me really respect that guy as like a man.
I know there are a lot of very clever, like, historical political jokes and jabs that are, like, not, like, lowest common denominator, but, like, very well, like, I don't want to say clever, but, like, very well crafted. I don't know how to put it.
And here's part of the thing, is The Boys, the comic, it's really a criticism of Bush-era war mentality and things like that, where, you know how in the show there was the famous scene with the plane, where they let the plane go down?
Yeah,
I don't think Hayes has seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
I know of it.
Okay. So you've seen
every other human in America has seen it. So I'm sorry, Haynes. You're the only one who can't enjoy this podcast now.
Well, hold on. But he's seen these fine clips. Apparently, he knows about some of the stuff.
I'll have surly opinions on things I don't know, as per the tradition of talk radio.
We could get into that, but in the comic, that plane is the plane from 9/11. It's actually like it's really on the nose. And in the comic, the superheroes are just fucking morons. In the show, they kind of know what they're doing. In the comic, it's literally just pure cynicism, where they're useless fucks that do nothing but sell toys and just try. And part of the idea with that scene is sending superheroes who don't know what the fuck they're doing to try to handle something like that. They would fuck it up because they would because they wouldn't know anything. And sorry.
You see, like, that's what I mean by well-crafted, because check this out. What is the likelihood that a superhero or even a vigilante would know how to deal with something like a hostage crisis?
That's what The Boys is about.
Evacuating a public transportation hub.
Well, yeah, that's
trying, like,
it takes away the whole superheroes always being on point with things. And in any regular comic, a superhero lands in a horrible situation, and everything turns out okay because I have superpowers.
Well, just
with the exception of characters like Superman and Flash, where they are literally fast enough to solve every fucking problem humanly possible.
Right.
How does Spider-Man stop a guy from pulling a trigger? He can't. He can dodge bullets, but he can't stop the trigger finger. But he does.
Spider-Man can web.
But because apparently he can move his wrist faster than a guy can pull a fucking trigger.
Well, but he's faster than some fucking schlub with a gun.
I don't know. A gun's pretty easy. I'm just saying.
He also has spider sense.
I know. He's not God. Where Superman is basically God.
Superman is God.
Right. He could solve any problem if he could stop jacking off.
If Superman didn't have a moral code to try and be nice first, he'd be the best hero ever.
He found a jar of Vaseline, but the V is like horns. Like, it's just like the fucking Satan's son is at it again.
Yeah, The Boys has
Tinder with the pitchfork.
Human incompetency.
You have to fucking copyright that. Tinder with a pitchfork.
I won't get too far into it, but I do want to say about The Boys real quick because it's so good. I just want to tell you too. And part of what makes The Boys so fucking smart is it's kind of an anti-war, anti-militarism thing. But what makes Garth Ennis so fucking good, it's almost a Nixon going to China situation where he is not anti-military. He's not a whiny fucking liberal drip who instinctively hates all conflict and says the troops are murderers. He actually portrays like this great deal of reverence and respect for the idea of a traditional military, where he has a whole scene where they do the Captain America thing where superheroes are sent to help the military, and the superheroes are not trained troops. They don't know what they're doing, so they end up making the situation much worse. And the military is portrayed as very good, where his whole mentality is having to wear a uniform, having to have discipline, having to have training, standing in the daylight where everyone knows your name and being part of this organization. There's a lot of trust and credibility there that leads to people, having accountability. Where if you have these black ops groups like The Boys, or you have the military-industrial complex, which the superheroes are basically an analog for that, it's this really scummy thing that actually corrupts what the military should be. And so it's this brutal motherfucking of American militarism, especially during the Bush era, but by the vehicle of having this really deep respect for what conventional troops do when they're doing the right thing. And that's what makes it so fucking beautiful. And it's smart in a way that so few comics are, and I loved it.
In regards to the reverence of the troops, I think one shining example of that, which is another example of what makes Garth Ennis such a great comic book writer, is his run with the Punisher Max. It's one of the greatest pieces of work committed to comic books, is the Punisher Max.
You'll have to tell me a bit, because I don't know. I know very little about American comics. 99% of comics I've read have been manga. I'm just trying to edge in the American shit a little bit.
Okay, so everyone knows the Punisher.
This man's a weeb!
Look at the channel you're on, motherfucker!
I don't care. I'm aware of it. I'm just gonna. I have to. Weeb.
You got to call a weeb and a spade a spade.
Look, man. This week I picked up because we still have to wear masks. I don't know if you've heard. You're into manga. I bought a Guyver face mask so I could just wear that. All right. So.
Hell yeah.
I want to get a full fucking Guyver suit, but they cost $2,000. I don't got that kind of money to throw away.
How ironic is it that you guys wear masks that cover everything, except the mouth?
Well, that we were doing it before it was cool, though.
Before it was government mandated.
And now I get to do full face coverings. It's great. No one has to look at my mug. And I can make faces at people when I'm walking by them. It's the greatest part of wearing a mask. Dude. It's just walking by strangers and making grotesque faces, and they just see your eyes, and they're like, it's fine.
Oh,
I love it.
People who mutter to themselves in broad daylight, just put on a mask, and now you're just some person on the street walking by.
Yeah, I don't look crazy talking to myself and trying to figure out what I'm going to do the rest of my day, or dealing with whatever issues I'm having.
Yeah, you see that wild-eyed hobo in that fucking open lot that's going to turn into yuppie kennels, bought up in this fucking vertical column of jerks moving into a neighborhood, and before that happens, we've got a wild-eyed hobo, but muttering to no one in particular.
Put a mask on him.
And put a mask on him, he just blends into the background.
And to some people, he's better than the ones not wearing masks, even though he's a crazy muttering hobo.
It's so weird if you're outside without a mask and people look at you like you just fucking danced on their grandma's grave.
I still do it. I walk around without a mask all the time. It's so
because for starters, how the fuck do people run with a mask? That is commitment I can't relate to.
No, I've done it.
It's just because you're a sociopath.
Because it's not hard.
Says Mr. Universe 4th place, and the only reason you're in such good shape is because of swiping right on things that aren't political on Tinder.
Also, I have the mask I usually use is not medical grade at all. And I've gotten away with it for the entire pandemic. It's super thin. But everyone just sees a mask and they're like, oh, he's wearing a mask. It's fine. I could probably spit through this mask if I tried hard enough. It's that thin.
Fuck. Have you seen the mesh masks?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Around here, where I live, I live in the fucking Mountain West, and we can get into that. That was the idea for the whole podcast, so we could get into that. But
there you go. There's your segue.
Oh, yeah, wait. I've got one piece on Ennis to cover when you're done.
Oh, yeah, I was a bit worried about that. We'll get through your thing real quick. But just real quick, around here, hating the government performatively is a fucking article of faith. And so people were wearing mesh masks around here for a while just to be dicks. And it's gotten to the point where now when you go outside, unless I go to the city center of the nearest city where a couple people wear masks, literally no one is wearing masks anymore. It's just over. We can get into that later. Hanes, do your thing. I'll be right back. I'm listening.
All right. So, Garth Ennis with the Punisher Max is basically this. Where does the Punisher fit in a post 9/11 world? You see, Peter Parker has always been in his 20s for 40 fucking years. Reed Richards has always had salt and pepper temples since conception. There are a lot of timeless figures. Some of them have evolved.
Is this the one where it becomes Old Man Punisher?
Yes, he's Punisher in his 50s. Yeah. Oh, no. That is a later what if. That's Punisher Senior Citizen in a tracksuit.
Okay, so it's not that one.
No. But that is how this ends.
Punisher in tracksuit's the best.
Walking around with an M4 in his golden years.
All the cops of New York City go, oh, don't worry, that's just Frank.
That's all.
Running around armed to the teeth.
Just, dude. So it's the Punisher in his 50s in a post 9/11 world, and it's kind of sad because right out the gate, Micro sells him out because he gives him up, and because they're we want you to hunt terrorists, we'll give you anything you want, and but the Punisher is Micro, they caught you and you gave me up like this, and he doesn't let Micro out alive, and it's just the Punisher. It's fucking issues 3 or 4 and 7, Punisher deals with human trafficking. Because of the Punisher Max, I learned that human trafficking is quite possibly the most lucrative trade of them all in the black market, in the illicit world where people with no scruples make their living off the misery of others. Because unlike drugs and unlike guns and unlike most other illicit substances, things, or items, or locations, really.
Items break and substances get used, but people are a lifetime of trade.
People break and get used.
What? No, but
if you go hard on them, if you make them last.
But a person can change an infinite amount of times for an infinite amount of money, like in theory. You can't do that with a crate of AKs.
Well, that person can do like slave labor, and then they can be put into the sex trade, and then you can make them build fucking like structure. Like,
or you could make them like sew Nikes together for 27 cents an hour.
You can change what they're used for.
You're right. You could,
God.
You could, so like the Punisher. Like, I learned that because of the Punisher Max. So the Punisher deals with human trafficking. Punisher deals with like PMCs in plain sight. Punisher deals with like remnants of the mob. It's such a well written. And part of it is because Frank Castle is a Vietnam vet, and it's sad because like it was this like meat grinder that churned out these people, like, and just if I may say quickly, like, look at No Country for Old Men, like 3 Vietnam vets doing their thing and a World War II vet going, I'm outnumbered, I don't know what's going on. That's No Country. So Vietnam vets are like a specific breed of animal, and Garth Ennis kind of like the Punisher Max is sort of like not a love letter to that. I'm not saying he did the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood version of that, but it's sort of like, look at the last of this dying breed.
Frank Castle's also a good character to write for people to really like connect with, because he has a human element to him. It's why people love Spider-Man, when you can connect with the character because they feel more grounded. It's always good. And even though Frank Castle's arguably a murdering psychopath, he has the human element behind him.
Yeah, that's a very generous, arguably.
So I'm just going to end on this.
I mean, it depends on your perspective. I think he's doing God's work.
Who's to say that God's work doesn't involve murder?
We can't wait for God to do all the work.
Yeah, not even God says that.
See?
If I've learned anything, God is very, very prone to killing people.
God is like Tony Soprano, but with even more trust issues.
As long as you've committed some kind of crime or sin in God's case, you're on the chopping block, and Frank Castle don't split hairs. Bad guys are bad guys are bad guys.
Yeah, my thing with God is like, I'm pretty open to the idea that God, exists and loves us. The idea that he's like worried about us being happy on a moment by moment basis, I really don't buy that.
If God exists, God is tending to a multiverse of issues and doesn't
like
have
jerking
time.
off.
Well, maybe, but a multiverse of other universes all at once.
Oh well, I mean,
there's a single God.
Well, wouldn't there be a God in that universe?
I mean, or maybe there's one God who's just like, fuck, I made too many.
And so he's like neck deep in maps and like astrolabes and globes, and things on the globes are on fire, but he's just walking by eating like cold cuts on crackers. I mean, he's I woke up late again. Oh God!
I've already gone on the record. I think the Elder Ones from the Cthulhu mythos are more accurate. They don't even notice unless you start calling it them. They're like, "What are these?" And then people call them evil for wanting to smite planets. They don't even comprehend consciousness. I can't see a God looking at humans and going, "Oh, they're so like precious." God would look at us and be like, "What the fuck is happening here?"
What's wrong with you people?
I think God is a like caring, loving entity. I do buy that for cosmological reasons.
I hope so.
Yeah, but I also think, if there's a God, they're probably so radically different from what we can perceive in our own consciousness that trying to understand anything about them other than the gist of like, oh, that's nice, is probably pointless.
I can neither confirm nor deny these allegations you say, Green. I'm just saying they make sense.
To help us.
Well, a thing with... Oh, sorry, go.
You're not wrong.
I can't imagine this cosmic entity looking at Earth and going, how do I solve all of this? I don't fucking know. I solve universal problems. I can make entire galaxies. What do they want? They want to stop fighting because they look different? How do I make them stop fighting because they look different?
Man.
Do I make a new planet?
Are you saying you made a mistake?
No, God didn't do anything. God apparently snapped and everything happened. You can't blame God for that.
Bringing this back to the magic thing, this is, to a large extent, I learned this through McKenna, but kind of an idea of the magic thing is God as very tied up in language, very tied up in the ordering of different levels. You know the phrase as above, so below, which is sort of the magic catchphrase? The idea being there that there are different layers of reality that glob onto each other. Part of an idea that runs through magic is the idea that the cosmos was not completely created and that God is the brother of man, and it's more that he created this expanse where there's a lot of things that could be different or have not been settled yet, and humans have an influence in how things play out and they participate in creation. Like the idea of God being born, because this is the thing. Okay, I'm not saying I actually was God at some point. But
go on. Okay, go on.
I've more than once I've been trapped in crazy fractal worlds, and a thing that really struck me about it was this is very boring. Like, this is crazy, and it's like, oh, awesome, the spirit of creation and all that, that's great. It's really, really boring, though, because it's like, yes, I am one with the universe, but, I can't look at stuff, I can't use words, I can't move. There's nothing to interact with because everything is everything. So the idea of God doing creation in a way that makes it more interesting and leaves a lot of weird shit laying around and a lot of problems. I could see God doing that just because, it's more interesting that way. But again, that doesn't translate into them trying to intervene to give us a really... I would see it more they're trying to give us an interesting, challenging reality than a wonderful one.
Well, I in an attempt to build on what you're saying in regards to this unresolved things and overlap, or this extension, this bleeding out into other things, I would argue that take intuition, for example. Everyone has intuition, and some people foster it and they build it and they're able to utilize it, and some people go their whole fucking life just never picking up on that. And your intuition, for the most part, because I dare anyone to be like, one time my intuition warned me of something and it was wrong. Good luck. That's like trying to find somebody who says ew, I don't eat Greek food. You're subhuman. You're subhuman. Go away. I don't have to take anything you say seriously. So everyone is born with intuition, because I don't know about you, Green, but one of the worst things in the world is when all right, when you tell I told you so, but to yourself, if your intuition tells you something and you're like, what do you mean make a left turn? I'm going to make a right turn 2 hours later.
That's very true.
Yeah. So so these unresolved things, I would go so far as to say all right, I have things filed away in my head that's you could call it bullshit, but I believe it. I can't prove it, but I know it to be true. All right.
Sure. Yeah.
So the brain is a two-way receptor. All right. One of the reasons this is evident is because sometimes we have dreams. And when you have a dream, everyone has at the very bare minimum boilerplate existence on Earth. You've had at least one dream where you saw something or you did something where something happened, and then time passes, and then something kind of sort of more or less it unfolds. Because the dreams are your subconscious trying to reach out to you. But it's abstract, and it's attempting to form something and communicate to you when your body's at rest and your brain is all na 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 na, as you're recharging for another day on this planet, which is what you should be happening. But there are things that work against that, but that's not what this conversation is about. The point is you have a dream. And that's why, Green, that's why you have a dream where it's it didn't look like Aunt Rosemary's house, but it felt like it. It registered like it. And Aunt Rosemary was there. That's why dreams aren't it's not hand in glove 100%, but it's your fucking subconscious trying to, in some abstract formless thing, be here's what you think, right? This makes sense to you, right? And that's why it could be days, it could be the next day, days, weeks, months, years later, you're oh shit. And then you have that moment where you're no, this was told to me at an earlier point in time in a dream. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be a dream. Sometimes you could be fucking wide awake, fucking scrubbing your fucking armpits in the shower, or taking a walk, or you're at your job and you see a moving image, person, place, or thing, bit of an argument, a piece of conversation, and it happens later. Like, I would go so far as to say we all have this.
That in that instance, like that's like what deja vu ends up being in some cases.
Right.
Just that moment of wait, like I've seen this. I know how this plays out.
Right.
I can avoid this.
I'd go so far as to say that intuition and deja vu draw from the same just wellspring, if you want to call it.
I don't want to go so far as to say like psychic ability.
But there is psychic residue and shit.
Oh, sure.
We already talked magic. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if anything because magic at its core bothers me. I don't like the idea of something that's mystical and unexplained. I like the concept that you just don't know how to explain it yet. We might get there, maybe, possibly, but like psychic intuition, I'm a fan of that because I've had instances myself where even with something as simple as that moment you're about to, you go to message someone or call someone and then they go, wait, I was just about to call you, and it's like, yeah, I know, what do you want?
Yep.
Like that moment.
Right.
that's very interesting. I want to say about that book I read, the one by Wilson. Repeating the framing device for the whole thing is Wilson, who was a very eccentric person. Do you know the cult movie Life Force about the naked sci-fi ladies who absorb? Like, okay, it doesn't matter. He wrote a book. He wrote some pulp novels. He took a bet with August Derleth, actually, who was one of the old pulp editor guys, that he could not write a Lovecraft book. So he wrote a bunch of pulp stories, and they turned into a shitty movie. It was funny. It doesn't matter. But Wilson was very. I don't know. It was a complete failure. It's known as it's a B movie it's a meme.
It's because Life Force is the fucking name of Gradius 2 on Nintendo, so I'm kind of sort of
seen this movie.
I'm kind of sort of interested.
Yes, I have seen Life Force.
Okay.
God.
Here we have it.
I had to make sure that it was the one with Patrick Stewart.
I mean, oh god. I think I saw it like when I was 10 at midnight on TV, I think it was one of those things. Yeah. But the thing about Wilson is he frames the entire book with the concept of what he calls Faculty X, where his introductory statement is not magic, is that a lot of people say magic was what humans did to understand the world before they had science. It's the science of the past. And his claim is magic is not the science of the past, it is the magic of the future. And magic is not the science of the past, it is the science of the future. Fuck. The thing is, his idea, I think, if you look at it, is all these different people that he follows in the occult, people like the ancient mystic philosophers who Hermes tries like Hermes, I'll just say Hermes. Fuck. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit this part. The ancient philosophers like Hermes Trismegistus.
No, it's a green. No one can bat 1,000. This is fucking calm your tits. No one can bat 1,000.
Okay. The ancient philosophers who laid the ideas of the multi-layered cosmos, like Hermes. The medieval people in the early Renaissance who were doctors and went around trying to do these instinctive cures to heal people's legs and things like that. People who developed astrology, the alchemists, where there was this moment of consciousness and matter were almost intersecting for a moment. And then he moves into people like in the early 1900s, people like Aleister Crowley, who was a vicious psychotic monster, but who still had this strange ability to cure people mentally, it seemed, when he wanted to.
Right. May have had ties to the devil.
Right.
He very explicitly would want you to think that. Learning about him was one of the most interesting things because it's amazing he wasn't killed on principle.
It was more recent.
More fun. Just in regards to Aleister Crowley, you had mentioned as above, so below earlier, Green. What I love about that statement is how it provides multiple means of interpretation and understanding and application. One thing I've drawn from as above, so below is how, to me, it's always reflected how, real no real. When it rains, it pours. Misery loves company. Money comes to money. Your vibe attracts your tribe. Steel sharpens steel. Like comes to like. I have no other way how to put it. Does that make sense?
I think so. Is like the law of attraction, or are we doing the secret?
No. But like for as Aleister Crowley's like as above, so below. So like while that does factor into overlapping things yet unresolved but part of a whole of reality, there's that. But there's also like, you know, a reoccurring theme of I have no other way to put it, like, you know, like steel sharpens steel, you know, like a huntsman always recognizes another huntsman in the woods. Like familiarity breeds something, but it is not contempt, ideally. Like, I'm not trying to say familiarity in a bad way. It's just like, so, like it's sort of like how people in the 90s ended up on fucking GeoCities and Angel Fire websites, like, because like if you were meant to be there, you'd find a way there. Like, how is it, you know what I mean? There was no roadmap. There were no hardcore search engines back then. Like Portal of Evil. I fell into Portal of Evil through fucking Sean Baby in like the fucking early 2000s. So like there was no roadmap. And this was back in a day where you had to register with a username and a password for websites to leave comments, you know? So, like fucking encyclopedia.zone. Like, everyone found their way there in a different way, kinda. Not all of them, but, like, just random internet exiles and refugees ended up on encyclopedia.zone. And some pretty awesome and amazing people, too. But that's besides the point. It's like...
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm done. I still have to say that Garth Ennis thing at the end of this podcast. But
I promise we'll get there. But you're talking about intuition, and I think you're talking about intuition and the connection between things, and how things seem to be pulled around or directed towards each other in a way that kind of makes sense.
Magnetism, I suppose. Like, magnetism is the only way I could call it without coming off as insane.
I've always just said that the universe works.
Say that again?
The universe works.
Yeah, all right.
And that's all part of what I'm saying, where to try the rereal, I know that got a little rambly, but part of the thing was, and there was another example that really stuck with me. Someone who actually met Crowley, and Wilson portrays as this duality with him, where this guy Gurdjieff, who was this Russian mystic self-help guy, he portrays him as Aleister Crowley was the black mage of the early 20th century or that era, and Gurdjieff was the white mage who was trying to do good things. Where Gurdjieff was this crazy, intense dude that was this like little buff bald guy with a crazy mustache, where he would take all these people, get them into big rooms, and he would have them do physical exercises, crazy meditation techniques, mindfulness. He would go around and he would like shock and surprise and hit people to like keep them on their toes. And his whole mentality was humans are almost always asleep. They're in this place where their brains and their potential is not manifesting because they're in this dreamlike state of not really being in the moment or understanding their full potential and the fact that they could be making choices. And there's this through line that Wilson portrays in this book where it's like, you can't quite make sense of it, where everyone who appears is kind of an idiot, or they don't know science because it's so long ago, or they're a fraud, or they're a monster like Crowley. But all of these people had this weird intuition where it seems like they could do things and understand things that a normal human could not, even if they don't really sync up with each other, or they're all kind of assholes in their own way. Where Wilson basically admits most magicians were frauds most of the time, but they occasionally did shit that does seem to be real. Where it's like, there's this through line that he calls Faculty X, where it's like each of these people in their own way, they're brushing against something real that we could nail down if we tried to approach it seriously, but no one really knows where it is, where there's some force in the human mind that does let you move beyond where you are, if you can tap into it, but we can't really systematically nail it down, and it's hard to convince people that there's anything behind it.
Here is an excellent segue, all right? Because just like gentrification, if you can't label it, if you cannot give it a name, you cannot discuss it without sounding like someone who's crazy, because you have no foundation. You know what I mean? If you can't if you can't give it a name or a term, how do you expect anyone to understand all of the underlying things and context of it? You know? So, like, that part of the mind, those faculties, and who knows, maybe like this white mage guy, he was like a proto Henry Rollins without the tattoos, but he was like self-righteous and shook people by the shoulders and fucking DDT'd people, so they did jumping jacks and writing poetry. What if like he was one of the dudes that's like, okay, we only use 5% of our brain, that guy's got like 12. All right.
I can only imagine it. Like a dwarf cleric going around kicking humans in the legs and being like, "Wake the fuck up!" More instead, create art.
It's almost like, imagine if Jordan Peterson was this really intense acrobat that would slap you in the face for daring to not live in the moment for a second.
You know, I
think we need more of that, to be fair. This whole spiritual awakening in the modern age has become very passive, like stretching and drinking tea and breathing. Yeah, let's get more physical about waking the fuck up.
Right. I think a difficult...
But this is why I say you can't just meditate and do drugs. You have to meditate and do drugs and exercise. There's got to be a full, like, physical, mental here.
Listen,
that's a knife in my side, but yes.
Listen, Munoxxus is the fucking certified personal trainer here, not me. But even I can attest to the fact that a strong body helps produce strong thoughts. Like, for whatever reason, exercise and physical labor and activity, like, it is necessary. Even fucking Socrates was like, it is a shame for a man to grow old and not see the limits and capacity of his physical strength of his body. You know, it is a shame for a man to grow old and never see that in his lifetime. And it's true because, like, yes, I could make a preachy, we didn't evolve to sit in fucking offices under fluorescent lights, which is true. But like,
please do, yeah.
But we've grown very soft and weak, and like the shaming of toxic masculinity almost makes me want to lift weights even more. I mean, it's like, okay,
toxic masculinity aside, I have had, and like this is going on years now, entire days where like I'll wake up and just intrusive, horrible thoughts about myself and like loathing and hatred, and my plan could easily be, let me go get some alcohol and drink it, or let me smoke, or I'm going to call my therapist and be like, I need help, I'm feeling negative thoughts. Or I can stand in front of a mirror and go, you're fine, everything's okay. You know what I do? I go run for 45 minutes and then do push-ups and crunches, and then when I'm done, I feel so much better. There's no negative thoughts that follow up like an hour of just physical activity. Oh. It's hard to shit on yourself and feel bad about yourself when you've just put yourself through a little bit of a gauntlet.
You know,
it's very difficult.
Listen, say what you will about Bill Hicks. One piece of his routine I like is like, you know, self-help and feel better and all these other things. And he's like, how about you take a walk when it's dusk? That usually seems to do the trick for me. And if I'm feeling expensive, maybe a fruit cup. Like, he's not wrong.
I mean,
like,
I just recently started, you read in the park, I read in the park, it's been a thing for a while. I started taking the opportunity to, now that the weather is nice, walk around Astoria Park in its entirety with a book in front of my face, just so I'm just like moving constantly while reading. Do you know how much reading I'm getting done by just moving and reading?
Oh, well, you're in a safe area like a park where you're kind of granted concession. You're not some dipshit walking down fucking like 42nd Street on 5th Avenue.
Why would I do
like,
that?
Against the flow of human foot traffic, like it's like some indignant prick.
All I'm saying
with
is
a sense of entitlement the size of fucking like Stone Mountain.
Or I sit in like my computer chair and try to read, I can sit there and run circles in my head, just getting distracted from my book and like, oh, the cat's doing something stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's a cute computer in front of me.
I mean, like for the longest time,
make me walk and read. I'm focused.
For the longest time, one of my best ways of getting reading done is just reading on the fucking train. For whatever reason, I could read the encyclopedia back to back on the train if it just take the Antaconi and back. If I want to read sometimes, and I need because okay. At home, I have the attention span of maybe like 2 hours max before like I can't read. Even if it's like I'm rereading Blood Meridian, 2 hours into it, my brain's like, all right, we're done. Got to do something else. But if I'm on a train, good luck. I used to feel that way in the library back when I was in college. The library was one of the few places where you could kind of like, it was sort of this like, okay, you're with people that got away for reasons, because reasons, and now you're here to study and read in quiet. So we're kind of like all in this together. Because like when you suffer alone, it's miserable, but when you suffer together, it's like heroic, like Lord of the Rings. So like it's just like all of us in this fucking 6th floor building of books and desks.
Because the library was always little kids in the kids section and the weebs in the weeb section.
Right? Well, there you go. Like, even
it's
in
really
the library,
sad that those are different groups.
Well, I mean,
even in the library
I went to.
Well, like all the weebs are like 40.
No. They were like creepy 50-year-olds. No, it's just like when the library had a section of people who were discussing manga and loudly discussing it, it was no longer a like library setting for me.
So
I can't read a book when people are talking about
It was
the
a
newest
temple.
chapter of something.
the library, I got a lot of like. Well, I mean, it
But
was
I also
mostly
always read all my manga online, so I never understood the whole.
on a screen like a jerk.
I had a phone, and I had access to people who would spend their entire day scanning and translating and uploading. All right, those people are fucking heroes.
Those people are unsung heroes, like the cameramen in fucking like Live Leak and World Star Hip Hop videos. They're the unsung heroes of our generation.
Getting a chapter release that comes from Japan the next day is kind of fucking impressive.
But trains and libraries aside, reading in the park when the weather is nice is one of my favorite things in the history of anything ever. Let that be on the record. And I even have my own little spot in the park, but it's like there's construction blocking between where I sit and the fucking river, and it's just why'd you got to do that to me?
You gotta sit by the basketball courts.
I could and I might, but Green, you're saying, I'm sorry.
Oh, I will say I have a horrible time with reading, partially because, especially fiction, my brain wanders so much that I have a hard time getting through books. I consume a lot more manga than reading, which is a bit embarrassing. So I might actually try the walking thing, though I'll probably go over a manhole cover or into a canal or something.
Don't listen.
Don't hurt yourself.
Listen, you know what you should do? You should do some push-ups. Check this out, all right, Green? And everyone who's listening right now, go ahead at some point this week that give yourself a 7-day window and pick a date and time, and you're going to be like, I'm going to do jumping jacks for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's it. You're going to give up after 2. The best of you will give up after 2. And just mark my words. So after exerting yourself, and so if you commit to these 5 minutes, really, and if you really commit to these 5 minutes, all right, you're going to feel, at the very least, a little better about yourself, and you're going to start moving and going about your day. And if you have strength and will, and if you know it's right, a part of you will be like, we're going to do this again. And then before you know it, you're going to be a super huge tough lord that eats battery and assault 3 times a week, and nothing can stop you from actualizing yourself. All right?
Oh, yeah, no, violence is the
5 minutes. It is the equalizer, the great equalizer of them all. So you begin by doing 5 minutes of jumping jacks, all right? And if you could do that, you could be the president of corporations.
I will say it has been a very interesting thing with me, where my whole enlightenment thing was via psychedelics. So I have a very odd, and reading about the occult and just becoming a weirdo in general. So I've gotten this very odd, intense thing of like, oh yeah, God, the spirit of creation is a beautiful thing. We're all one consciousness. Also, I'm still an angry shithead that's like talks really violently sometimes. And you also
and Green, you also have to take into consideration that there's a lot of blood and thunder out there. Like there's just it is not peaceful at all, one bit, and not just because Live Leak and World Star Hip Hop tell you so. Like even on Twitter, you could be minding your own business, and here's a car getting turned over and people freaking out. There's a lot of blood and thunder out there, so you have to get strong. And you know how you start? Do 5 minutes of jumping jacks, and then before you know it, you're going to be like, if I do push-ups, do I do like 1-2s better? What exercises do I have to do to throw a right cross? I'm right-handed. You know what I mean? You're going to start to figure things out. You're going to be like, if I do squats, can I do hip thrusts and underhooks better? Like you're like, now I have to eat like walnuts and yogurt, so you could squat better, so you could hip thrust people twice your size, and then you have to go for the eyes because the eyes are the groin of the head. So you start doing like grip exercises where you put your hands in like buckets of sand and you just keep squeezing until you're exhausted, and you cry and you keep going. And you know how you start?
Jumping
5 minutes of That's right, Green. 5 minutes of jumping jacks.
I'm wondering where Kegels are going to factor into this.
Kegels only play in when you're trying to slam harder, and you know what I'm talking about.
This is kind of on topic. I don't even know what the topic is, but there's this thing that's kept coming up where humans always have these yearnings and feelings around them, and they need something to do with them. I think they're really the fundamental thing that motivates us to do anything. We just have this in us. Humans have spiritual yearning, they have emotional yearning, they have social yearning, they have linguistic yearning, where I will say this right now, I believe that language is basically an organic extension of our beings, where I don't think it's, we're physical and then, language is this thing we made up with. I think in a lot of ways, with language, we're casting out a part of who we are or who we will be, that depending on how it happens, it will gradually become more physical and slowly be incorporated into who we are and our biology. I think that a lot of the problems with what we've been talking about is there are these impulses, but they're all being directed inwards. And by that, I mean, if you draw a boundary around humanity, we feel confined. And so we're using this stuff against each other, where we have this impulse to cast out our language, order the universe, build out, develop things, consolidate information. But we feel so confined, we're using that against each other, where people are sitting around. Real quick.
I would argue that it is also being used against us from the top down, which is part of what makes it so effective. Like, not just on a top-down level, but on an interpersonal level,
That is potentially true. Well, I'll ask you about that in just a sec. And, part of the thing is, if humans have opportunity, they're in a positive-sum mindset. They're willing to cooperate much more and be much less fussy about resources. If they feel hemmed in, they look at each other and they hammer shit out until everyone gets ground down to the exact point where no one can get anything by going after someone else. And that form will be stable for a while, but that's a miserable place to be. And I feel like we can't look outwards anymore. We feel hemmed in. So people who are linguistically oriented, people who have a mystical bent, what they really should be doing is casting their language and their ideas out into the unknown around them and building things and, increasing complexity, making beautiful artwork. But we don't really have opportunity. We feel like our agency has been taken from us, and where knowledge is in the hands of authorities, the economic system is so set, you can't really innovate or have any control as an individual. So because we're boxed in, we're doing this to each other. We're throwing language at each other and trying to fuck with each other when when a significant portion of the population are emotionally and personality oriented in a way where if they had the chance to go out into the unknown and direct it that way, they would find new shit that they could share with all of us. But people just feel trapped and they feel asleep, and we're not awake or alive. We're just stagnant. And I think that's fucking killing people. And a lot of this occult stuff that is resurfacing in weird ways is an awareness of we need that and we don't have it. I know I went on a roll there, but please respond.
No, just real quickly. I'm going to run my mouth for 90 seconds, and then Munoxxus takes the floor.
I'll time you.
So, all right, time me. Go. This is important.
All right, go ahead.
Jeopardy music incoming.
He's going to have to... You got the timer...
Go!
Okay.
Go, Hanes.
So, to bring it back to my statement earlier about existential pillars in our lives eroding and people clinging onto things, while there are some people clinging onto things, I would argue one of the reasons why even certain Twitter accounts end up becoming famous is because eventually people, like Greenhead said, brush up against something, and some people have a great way of articulating it or themselves or certain things or expressing it in a certain way that makes people go, because I would argue that is the mark of a true artist. And of course, there is an intertwining argument about art and the occult that could be made, but we could either go into that later, but that is not the point. I am on the timer. I am just flexing just a wee bit. So the point is, the occult, or what can be argued as the occult, begins to manifest in a number of different ways, and we can't avoid it because we are all now subjected to the global marketing algorithm-driven global mind control grid. So some people, at the very least, can figure out a way to discuss that which is organic and slowly punctuating through the roofs of our skull and into our being to fight back against this loathsome top-down astroturfed existence that we know isn't right. So I think I'm done. No, I've got like 11 seconds left.
No, kill 11 seconds.
Okay, subscribe to 718 TV. Subscribe to twitch.tv/Munoxxus. Follow him, because it's the best stream you're not watching. Cameraman's gonna stop hiding shit in your living room if you don't.
In reference to the whole idea of, well, first, language being more physical, I think, is something that people just don't pay attention to. You can read a lot more from the hand gestures and the facial features and the changes in someone's like eyes than you can from what they're saying. I can lie directly to your face with words, but if you can read the wrinkles in my face, you're like, there's something wrong. And I'm like, no, I'm not, I'm fine. But you can tell that I'm angry. That's just, I wanted to touch on that real quick.
Or what you're doing with your hands.
My hands, my face, my body language. Not what I want to mention, though. That was just, I had to get that out of my system. The whole overreaching of spiritualism. I think humanity is coming to terms with the fact that we don't understand shit about fuck. We've completely eliminated any kind of mystery left on the planet. We've explored all of the surface. Mm-hmm. We can barely get the fuck to our satellite, the moon, and we cannot even reach the bottom of the ocean. So now we're reaching and being like, well, what else is out there? There's gotta be something more. There's gotta be like fucking aliens and like angels and gods. No, you're on a rock and there's nothing left and there's nothing special and you're not gonna find anything new and amazing. It's you've tapped everything. Here's all the drugs on the planet unless you make new ones. Here's all the shit in the ocean unless you go into dangerous places. Have fun on the dead planets, everybody. There's nothing fucking out there. And humanity is stuck with that realization of, oh shit, there's nothing left. And it took us thousands of years to get here, but we finally got here, boys. There's nothing left to find.
That's it. That's the thing.
And now we're stuck being like, find something else. Magic, gods, mysticism, anything. Make me feel something that's like it's not just dead and alone in space.
Flat Earth, reptiles.
Anything. I can't be alone with my thoughts and the fact that we're alone and on this fucking ants on a sand planet. Yeah, I don't know. That's just
anything to shy away the misery of paying bills and suffering until I die.
Of realizing that we've explored it all around us. And at least you got guys like Musk, where it's like, get the fuck off the planet. We gotta keep going.
Yes. I was just thinking about Musk yesterday.
However, because if we don't do that, if we really don't start, and it doesn't matter if they're dead planets, humans can make dead planets livable. We can do it. But if we're just stuck here on Earth, what do we have left? The deep sea? What are we going to find? Ancient dinosaurs and go, oh, look, that was distracting for 30 years.
Oh, no. Listen. The one thing about the ocean that we really can't fuck with is how, listen, we've been to space, we've been on the moon, we've traversed different parts of the Milky Way, but the blackest depths of the ocean is not meant for us to go down there. Because even as like a puny water-based meatbag with eyes and a soul, and you try to swim down, eventually the pressure will disintegrate you into like a trillion single-cell organisms.
You get deep enough.
Okay. So then you have to go into like a submarine, and then you go maybe like 5,000 feet down, and then the submarine crunches into itself into like a 3 by 3 inch diameter like orb, because it's so dense.
And somewhere down there, Cthulhu sleeps.
So then,
comfy.
So then you get this like magnificent modern day space age tech worked on by vets that contracted themselves out of like Raytheon, Boston Dynamic, and General Electric. And then you go another 5,000 feet and you keep going. And then the sensors are like, if we go 10 feet more that way, we're done. Like, we have to go up now. And everyone's like, I guess we got to go up now. And that's where we're at. So we will not find what is at the very bottom. Like, we don't have the current. And like, I think the most arrogant, this will be mankind's folly, all right? In the event we terraform Mars, in the event Elon Musk ends up becoming like, punished Musk, a space emperor denied his galactic empire, all right? And then like, then it turns into like fucking a cross between like Neuromancer, Asimov, and Bruce Sterling, all right? That's the future we live in, all right? So then like we're in other fucking galaxies, and then we get like, oh, this is the fucking ocean planet. We have it's just a core. It's just like a ball of dirt, and in the center of the dirt is molten, and they just like in Minecraft, they just like built like concrete around it. It's still an orb. It doesn't fuck with the magnetism. All right, back to ocean world.
I mean, technically, there's an ocean world that has an ocean.
So they get
humans on it.
So they get tech from that planet, and then they come back to Earth, and they get to the bottom of the ocean, and then whatever's at the bottom of the ocean will never forgive us for what we did, and that will be our downfall.
Hold on.
Mark my
the
words.
bottom of the ocean is going to be trash, probably.
Surprise! The ocean's full of nothing. It's dead dinosaur bones and plastic.
I was thinking about Musk the
plot twist. It's Cthulhu, but he died from starvation. It's just his giant corpse.
Cthulhu's tentacles are all wrapped in those fucking like little beer holders, and he just suffocated. And we killed an elder god with garbage.
All those masks that were flushed down the toilet and like dumped into the ocean, just covering him, matting him on the floor.
Yeah. We stopped the apocalypse with plastic.
We stopped
oh
Cthulhu.
fuck! Yeah, the trash island out in the Pacific. What if we finally cleaned that up and it was Cthulhu? He just had shit on him.
Maybe, or it could be a fucking kraken that we just threw.
He was
shit
just
on.
taking a nap. Like, hey guys, thanks.
Yeah, it turns out mermaids were real. They were really sexy and totally DTF. But the last one died yesterday. God damn it.
Atlantis was totally salvageable until it was covered in garbage. That's the last frontier we have, short of going out into the stars. And let's be fair, do you really want to know what's out there?
Yes.
A part of me really does, but here's the problem.
Hold on, everything that's out there that we could find is either, like, we're talking the paradox of we're the only thing alive in the universe, and you find nothing.
No,
Or potentially, you find shit that completely breaks apart the foundation of human civilization as a whole. Do you want to find nothing and go,
is that bad?
We're alone?
My biggest...
I mean, I'm a fan of it because I don't believe in any of this shit, but I feel like a lot of people's entire livelihood is built upon the backbone of, like, human belief, whether it be religion...
Imagine having beliefs.
Or the sciences that we hold true.
Munoxxus has transcended the need for your beliefs.
And then you find a species that looks at us and goes, oh, look, the monkeys finally got off the rock. And all of a sudden, we're now just like slave labor camps for xenomorphs.
My biggest fear... Green. My biggest fear... Because, like, listen, Munoxxus isn't wrong. My biggest fear is that, like, all right, like, we explore space, and, like, you know, for a while, it's just, like, Neil Young's Keep on Rockin' in the Free World for, like, 40 years, and, like, it's great. Everyone...
I thought you were going to do after the gold rush.
Like partying, it's great. We get along with the tentacle people. They're not hentai, so it's okay. We're hanging out with the tree people, the fucking molten dwarves who live in the mountains of Unthamar in Galaxy 8, like, fucking 40,000 light years to the west. Like, by some freak accident, some black bag DARPA gravitational bullshit travel thing gets leaked, and Elon Musk is like, yoink. And then before you know it, we're traveling through, like, different galaxies, all right? So for, like, 40 years, we're going to have this, like, unbeatable streak. And then we're going to meet some, like, slight smidgen bit of, like, some awful, evil galactic empire. And it's like, oh, there's, like, a sentry drone. Well, and it's like, what is this?
In
Earth. And just, like, we're gonna, like, not quite the xenomorph slave labor camps, but we're just, like, there's gonna, like, who knows? They're gonna be, like, you know, the singularity that everyone was all worried about? Well, some prick, like, the guy who figured out WASD, he, like, singularity'd into space, and then he was slowly building an empire, and now he's coming to claim it back. So, like, 40 years into, like, we meet him, and then we're his fucking slave labor, and just, and anything living, can you use a mouse and a fucking keyboard, play fucking... Counter-Strike for me, so you could keep the Icelandic hackers away and busy. They take this shit seriously.
Robot overlords, totally an option out there somewhere. My worry is more that the things out there are going to behave a lot like us, and we're already all pretty shitty towards each other. Now imagine a whole other species on another planet. We're just going to be shitty to it as well. Oh. And if it's bigger and badder than us, we're fucked.
That's it.
Also, like, in terms of, like, the slave labor camps, what if we end up with, like, some DBZ Frieza shit? And it's just this galactic overlord who decides to go, look, the monkeys. And the second we get unruly...
Okay, Munoxxus, this is the thing, though. You're forgetting the principle of symbiosis. And how creatures that occupy different niches by adapting to each other can find a way to, sync together and come up with a system that, even if no one involved understands that, benefits them more. Like, what if we create intergalactic symbiotic structures where we're all part of one universal community of living beings that communicate with each other?
Green, have you seen Earth?
That's what Earth is.
No, it isn't. Earth is just us fighting each other over imaginary lines.
Earth is Hell's R&D. Earth is Hell's R&D department.
We can't even figure out that we're all from the same planet, and we're on the same planet.
Have you seen the Balkan Wars, my dude? Come on,
no. But the thing is, the Balkan Wars. But by interacting with each other, humans have gradually invented systems that incentivize, mutual cooperation and working on things. As much as I hate it, the international neoliberal capitalistic structure, it is a massive tool for facilitating nonviolent interactions and mutual cooperation. It has effects of deranging the system on the whole that are really unpleasant and unstable, but it still does do it. And not so long ago, it was unthinkable that humans would be able to do that. And it's like
that the thing that we find agrees with our system of cooperation and doesn't go, oh, look, more slaves.
Well, here's the thing. Even if we try to enslave each other, I think the repeating instances of conflict gradually giving rise to the more successful strategies going over time will gradually adapt to each other and, become system. I won't say, it could just go bad. One group could just, completely obliterate the other. Yeah. But there is a way it could play out if done carefully that would result in, something better.
And who's to say the people that are in charge of our own global systems of working with each other don't sell out the rest of us? We'll work with you at the cost of our own.
Well, they can try, but ultimately I think Charles Darwin is the person who's going to control this, his ghost pulling the strings from behind. There are
I think technology is the one thing that usurps evolution as far as I'm concerned. We don't need to evolve anymore. We just have
I don't
tech.
think technology is separate from evolution. I think it's probably going to become an extension of who we are.
It's so let it be known. Screen cap this. Green approves of nation states sending their armies to fight other armies and invade places wearing human body armor, mech suit, starship troopers, pulse rifles. Look at me. I have the pew pew option, and then I have the click click boom option, and that shoots like a little sphere, and it's like a small, tiny little gravitational bomb, and it wipes out Connecticut. So, Green approves of that. Green has no...
Or it could just be some StarCraft shit.
He's all war's never going away, so technology is evolution. So then Judge Holden's coming back in, 2153.
Why couldn't we end up on a planet where the entire, intelligence of the planet, the species that's there, is just insectoid creatures that eat and consume, and now we have to deal with that? They're not even smart. They just kill shit. They just fucking spawn and kill.
They just have 40 strength. We can't do anything about it.
And they live because that's what they do. They're just hunter fucking killer monsters.
Well, we might find situations where it is just us or them, and that would suck. But if we stay here, it's us for a while or no one. So
we're fucked here.
We still need to go.
We 100% have to get the fuck off the planet. 100%.
Listen, Green. There are things that, as long as they stay unresolved, here's one, all right? So as long as the world does not agree with the fact that there's no such thing as a coincidence, we'll never move past certain cycles. We all can't come to terms with certain things. Even something as there's no such thing as a coincidence, there are certain things that once we're all across the board can be yes, birds fly, grass grows, fish swim, we all have intuition, and there's no such thing as a coincidence. So but that'll never happen. So we're here. And that's not the reason, but that is a reason. Another reason, because you had mentioned language earlier, all right? So, I will spare everyone things like Black Lives Matter doesn't discuss black on black crime, because if Black Lives Matter, they'd be angry about being able to buy an African slave in Libya for $200 American, give or take.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole, we'll say for another day.
But Black Lives Matter is a perfect exercise of language, and where, for starters, what they are about is in the slogan itself. And then if you were to refute it, immediately one of 7 like options is like you're racist, you're a bigot, you're a white supremacist, you're a white nationalist, you're a Russian bot. The list goes on. Like, the very fact that you're questioning, like, can you explain your position, and you're never provided an answer. Righteous indignation being the response not only like leaves you going, this makes no sense now. It also fosters them, like, because their existential pillars have eroded. And it's not just like, you know, there are black people in Black Lives Matter. Like, there are a lot of Chomsky honks in Black Lives Matter. And it's like, because, like, Munoxxus, like, we have nothing. We have nothing. So now we have, like, people who have came from, like, affluent neighborhoods, and they have nothing else going on in their lives. And now they're going around in public because, like, your grandma might have died and you couldn't go to her funeral. And now, like, this Chomsky honk in fucking New Hampshire is going to move to our city and then claim she's from New York, and then she's going to be like, I was at the protest at Union Square, and she's all like mean and indignant about it and constantly doing Instagram stories about that nonsense, and it's just like fetid and it's gross. All right. And like, so if I am to ask her, like, how does, like, okay, so in Chicago 7 people died last night, I mean, that's, listen, I know that's like football numbers. You could kind of phrase it like that. But then she's like, oh, you like football. The football perpetuates white supremacy. Meh, 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 meh. And like, they can't tell you why they're offended. They just are offended. That's it. And then there's like the recreationally offended, but that's a different like category in population.
I will... Sorry.
So
very good. It's the same language. Like, I'm not sure, Green, if you saw this. Hanes had to deal with a tweet war site kind of recently, where someone was like, "Oh, your grandparents are the reason some people's like family members had to drink from separate fountains," and it's like, this man's not even from this. Like, his answers aren't even from this country.
Right. Like,
good job using your ability to speak to define something, and then it's just wrong. It's entirely wrong.
TLDR.
I get that. Hold on, I get that shit too. Where because like I'm white. Oh no, my ancestor did something. Actually, I can trace back my ancestors, and at one point there was this big war, and some of my ancestors were in camps, and then some of my other ancestors were fighting against the people in those camps, and some of my other ancestors, they were on the same side as people in those camps.
It's funny you bring that up. We don't need to get into this too deep.
Right.
But let me just say real quick.
Yes,
okay, go Munoxxus.
Go.
Okay. I live in an area that, let's just say, is pretty close to the traditional Nez Perce grounds that they lived on, and I'm a significant. I'll just fucking say I live in Idaho. I'm like a 6th generation Idahoan or something like that.
You're a honky?
No, but my great grandma. I have a great grandmother who I knew when I was very young, who lived in this area. She would have been here not that long after Chief Joseph was, ejected from the area. So, like, I had a family member I knew who lived where I live, who, even if her parents weren't involved, I don't really know, she 100% knew people that, like, finished off, like, the last of the Native Americans. So, if anyone in the comments wants to, do inherited guilt or something, like, I'm actually a much better target than either Hanes or Munoxxus here, so feel free to do that.
What a good guy.
Yeah,
he's taking the slings and arrows of accusations of upholding white supremacy for us.
But that whole language thing, like, you look at someone and decide, I'm going to use a certain term against them.
Right. So TLDR.
How dare you?
TLDR. So someone tweeted a brief clip of the Grammys, and it was the scissoring scene of the Wet Ass Pussy song. And it was a live performance, and it was just like a 14-second clip of it. So I quote tweet it, and I type, "Our grandparents wouldn't consider us human." So one of the replies was, "Your grandparents are the reason, like, my grandparents, like, drank from different water fountains." And my quote tweet response is, like, "My grandparents are from Greece and Ecuador. Like, I'd like to know where you're going with this." And have you seen the Kentucky Fried Movie?
No.
Oh, so just picture in your head like a Chinese guy in like a lab coat with giant headphones with a directional mic in one hand, and he's crouching in the corner of a room, like, pointing at you. Like that's the picture with the tweet. Like, my grandparents are from Greece and Ecuador. Like, I'd like to know where you're going with this. It's
also, as if fucking black people in the South in the 50s would have been cool with the scissoring thing.
Like, right, which on top of this, like, insane black and white accusation, because now that's the only way they could view the world. There's also like Grandpa Green and Grandpa Munoxxus and Grandpa Hanes looking at wet ass pussy, and one's weeping, one's drinking uncontrollably, and one is just walking in a figure eight, muttering just like curses under his breath.
Like my grandparents.
You knew I was doing that?
That was Grandpa Green. That was Grandpa Green.
My mic is fucking set up. I'm standing right now, so I walk away from the mic when I'm not talking. Okay.
That's Grandpa Green. That's Grandpa Green.
I will say, I think we probably should transition out of this quick, but I will say this. I think that's an example of what I'm talking about, where the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter language thing, and I am going to try to keep this brief. I see any time that people are trying to enforce language amongst each other rather than use it to communicate clearly, I always think, immediately in my head, I see it like, okay, this is intergroup squabbling. This is about people trying to maintain cultural norms that benefit them. This is meaningless. I am the, mystic on the edge of society guy who is, invoking like shamanic consciousness and like encountering novelty. This is fucking worthless to me. Enjoy quibbling about nothing, because that's what enforcing language amongst each other is, you fucking idiots.
Right, and it's a perfect time sink. Like, it's a perfect time sink, too, on top of all of this.
And the language aspect of that, I see that as almost more trying to cast a spell on someone than actually, because the whole thing is like the all lives matter is such a trap, where if someone says that, it's almost more a method of starting a fight where you can accuse the other person of being evil rather than trying to do anything useful. I'm sure commenters are going to love that. But I will say, to me, I really think that's part of this other layers of consciousness, impulses towards the unknown, faculty X, all the underground shit. And it's the problem is, real quick, Hanes, the problem is people are fucking hemmed in with each other. They have nowhere to go. So they're looking at other people, casting words at each other, trying to put each other in boxes, squabbling over stupid bullshit, which under the guise of doing things that are useful, when a significant portion of these people should be coming out with me, looking at the unknown, doing drugs, coming up with new language systems, new ideas, getting people to dream of going to space. And then people who are less into that, but still into the idea of actually doing useful things with their lives, can come out, go out with us, and we have a place to expend our energy that is useful. And then we won't have to fucking do this shit. And I'll give you guys a chance to give a thought real quick. We probably should move on to we were going to go gentrification for a moment there. I feel like that would be a good idea. If you guys want to tie this up real quick, I know I just said a thing.
I mean, I can tie it up very easily as far as the whole...
Okay, Munoxxus, go. Then let's do gentrification. Fuck.
Everyone trying to get each other's throats and decide what matters and what doesn't. No lives matter. That's it. No one's more special than the other. No one's more important. No one's lower or above. Just no one.
I would like to conclude with, to quote Munoxxus, your life matters. Like, it starts and ends with the self. So, like, sure, like, if you could wrap your mind around it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of priority, like, just worry about you and then start from there. But some people don't begin at worry about you. And that's part of the reason why we're here. That's
like people from California, am I right?
And part of New York, kind of.
God, Hanes, it would be awesome if you just like started hating on people who moved into your neighborhood while I went to the bathroom.
Oh man. Okay, so
you should probably start from the top though, because like I could talk about growing up and how much nicer it seemed.
Well, I would before I concede the floor to you. Before I concede the floor to Munoxxus, I would just like to say that Munoxxus and I grew up here in Queens, New York, and we had a front row seat to gentrification, which on one hand we kind of avoided to a degree.
I don't know. I don't want to say I avoided it. No, I have to. I did not avoid it because I have accepted it with open arms.
Compared to Brooklyn, we've avoided it. That's not the point.
Okay.
Listen.
You mean fine.
Listen. So, Queens, parts of Queens. Well, you see, Queens is the most ethnically diverse county in the nation. All right, and it's fascinating because part of the reason, in fact, the only reason it works is because everyone keeps to themselves. I mean, sure, like Italians will tolerate Greeks, and like Ecuadorians will tolerate Colombians, but it's not like you see like Malaysian and Indonesian people hanging out with like the Polacks and Greenpoint and the Germans in Glendale. Like everyone, for the most part, keeps to themselves because like people just like. I don't know, wow, people naturally segregate themselves and want to be around like-minded, like people, I suppose, with like cultural ties, and they're immigrants, and second, third, and fourth generation blank Americans all over Queens, all right?
But we have that segregation, but we also do it right next to each other, and then we have sections of intermingling, and everyone knows where to go to get certain, like, I know if I want to get some good, like, omurice, or some, like, bangin' sushi, or whatnot, I go to Flushing,
right?
And if you want to go and get your Greek food, Astoria was the place to go for a while.
But then even on top of that, take the Greeks, for example. Sure, there are, like Astoria has more Greeks than anywhere else in the world outside of Greece. On the other hand, like, people from Crete in Greece tend to be like, I just want to hang out with people from Crete. And then there are Cyprians who, like, they're kind of like the Sicilians of Greece.
Yeah.
And
what about the lesbians?
They're still there, but they're quiet and they wear all black. Some of them look really lovely, actually.
The lesbians hang out in Long Island City.
Don't you can't quote me on that, but you could quote Munoxxus on that. In fact, like Munoxxus, like for him, it's like achievement unlocked. On her Tinder profile, it said she was queer, and he was like, nah, not tonight. And then he swept right, and then like 7 hours later, like
you say that like it's an uncommon thing. I'm not really into men. And then like they were, but now they're not. But then they are again.
A thing about that, there have been several high-profile studies where basically any denomination of sexuality, the boundaries around it are so fucking blurry that it's almost more a tendency or a flavor than anything hard. Because some people are really 100%. Strict, like one way or the other. But they've done surveys where it's like, it's like a huge portion of gay men have had sexual encounters with women since they realized they were gay. It's just it fucking goes either way.
It's just that like when we were on vacation, Daddy killed a man in the bathroom, and then like it came back to haunt him 25 years later because he went cruising in the 50s. Like he was gay. He was just married. He was just gay. He just had like a married wife and kids. That's what things were back then.
That was fucking weird. I didn't know that was like a reference. That freaked me the fuck out. I was like, what are we talking about?
No. Listen, ever since, even before Kinsey, there were studies that there were like people who were living closeted lives with a beard and a wife and a kids, and they did things like go to bathhouses. This has been, I suppose, set and standard ever since maybe like post World War II. So then, like, for the first time, there's no inherent evil other than communism, all right? So, like, Kinsey, there are, like, just like you said, Green, like, there are some people who are, like, just 100% this way or 100% that way. But then, like, let's say, take the term bisexual. For all you know, bisexual could mean, like, a person who has had sex or relations or has been involved with, like, one person of the same sex and 99 of the other, or 99 of the same sex and one of the other, and everything else in between. Like, that's a ridiculous net to cast. And then what if people don't identify as bisexual and they identify as something else? Then there comes, like, all of this unpacking, and it's impossible to, like, label after a certain point. But yes,
I will say I don't want to get too...
What is up with like serial killers that are like married, like fucking like even like a Gacy? He was like, oh, he's a pillar of the community, and look what he did to all those young men. What is up with that reoccurring theme with some serial killers? Is all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm just getting FBI.
I'm just getting a little lost. I will say, this is the last thing about language I'm going to say, I promise. But I think it's very weird that our problem is like we realize that under language, you encounter all these shades of gray. And rather than just living in the gray, we decided, let's label every individual stripe of gray, which is frustrating. About the gentrification thing, living in New York is, right off the bat, what you're starting with is so alien to me because I grew up in southern Idaho. Super conservative area, super rural. People identify instinctively with fucking westward expansion and cowboys and that era. I'm in the Mormon corridor. I was raised Mormon for a significant portion of my youth. Around here, awareness of ethnicity and even processing the idea of like a multi-ethnic society is pretty new to people. Like, it's extremely white, and even in my lifetime, that has changed a lot. Where it's went up to like 10% of people are not white, and like most of that is in my lifetime, it seems. And
now, wait. In that 10%, what is the breakdown? Is it like a Black, Asian, Native American, mixed race, Pacific Islander?
The weird one is like the absence of black people, because I mean it's not weird and like hard to explain, but the
is it because you saw your first black person in Seattle?
I think the first black person, I had a few black kids. There were always like one or two black kids at the schools I went to. Like the first black adult I met was it was a military guy where they were having military dudes come around and tell us, be safe and, don't do drugs, be a good person. They were doing one of those programs. And because the military draws for the whole country, like some of them were black. I think that was the first black adult that I ever actually talked to when I was a little kid.
Oh, so you were indoctrinated into being a dare soldier?
It was
a child
something like
dare
that.
soldier.
But it was something like that. Like there have always after white people, it's mostly Latino. Like there have always been Latino families in the area that work and shit. There were always a significant number of Latino kids who went to my schools. All the Latino boys actually beat me up once, but that's a story for another day.
Now by Latino, do you mean Mexican, Ecuadorian, Colombian,
almost
Chilean?
all Mexican. It's one of those It's one of the parts of the country where if you're Latino, it's just assumed that you're Mexican.
Because in New York, if you're Latino, you're assumed either Puerto Rican, Dominican, or Mexican.
I think the safe one is always Puerto Rican.
Yeah. Yo, there are mad Puerto Ricans in like Boston and what the fuck are Puerto Ricans doing in Chicago? What the fuck is up with that? Like
working?
How'd you stray so far from the fucking like pretend motherland, you New Yorican, non-Spanish speaking, fucking jerks? Whatever. That's a different
Haynes
story.
is so used to walking, he thinks that's how his family got there from Greece.
They left footprints somewhere in Ithaca, New York.
Yeah, he just goes down to the ocean looking for the Great Sidewalk. And around here there actually are some Asian families, partially because in the West it's a thing where a lot of Chinese that came over to build railroads, they learned to make food and started restaurants. So every shitty Western town has like one Chinese family that runs the local Chinese restaurant.
Wow.
That just happened 100 years ago.
So it's just like variations on a theme?
Yeah, and there's actually a couple Filipino families that grew up near me just by coincidence somehow, but there were like no black people, and like people around here are just now, especially in the small towns, like they're barely processing the idea of, even if most of them are not mean about it, they're barely processing the idea of living in a multiracial society at all, except for just like having a couple Mexicans that live in their town. And
that's fucking wild.
It is. And
all right.
It's hard for people to even comprehend that, because like the idea, and people here who are white, occasionally someone will be like, I'm German, I make German pancakes, and that's basically it. The idea of being in a fucking neighborhood where there's all these little intact communities of different ethnicities and cultures and stuff, that was like mind-blowing to me, because to me, I just perceived America as a sea of white people that I didn't see very often.
Wow. I mean,
not around here.
Can I just interject real quickly?
It's crazy.
So just real quickly, I just want to interject because this cycles back to Queens, I assure you. The way Green had described how, like, imagine the variations on a theme of like a different town, a different Asian family, and even if it doesn't matter if they're like Chinese or like Korean or Malaysian, it's like they're still making like takeout in whatever variation of like, oh, these are like Idaho Dutch, Idaho German, Idaho Irish, like 80th generation Idaho, like stock honky white people, like different.
There are no 88th generation Idaho. It's like 7 at most.
So that reminds me of how between Brooklyn and Queens, all right? So like from Queens, Munoxxus and I could look at parts of Brooklyn and it's like Shelbyville. You know that Simpsons episode, Lemon of Troy?
No.
All right. TLDR, kids from Shelbyville steal a lemon tree in Springfield and they take it to their town. So then the kids go to steal it back and their rival, that the town that they have been rivals with for so many years, it's basically Springfield. But like instead of like Moe's, it's Joe's, and it's Mo with long hair. And instead of the Quickie Mart, it's like the Fasty Mart, and it's like an Asian guy instead of an Indian guy. And like their groundskeeper is a Scottish woman instead of a Scottish man. So like
it's a copy.
Like I could go to parts of Brooklyn and be like, this is a fucking like bootleg version of Jackson Heights.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this? Because it's like so visually different, even the way the blocks and avenues and houses are lined up. Like I could go to Brighton Beach and be like, if you take away the beach or just replace the Russians with Latinos, this is basically the 7 line.
I mean, I think I mentioned this to you a little while back. So we have our Woodside area, which, I mean, I don't know if there's a specific Latin culture that's associated with Woodside, because it kind of has sections where it changes.
Right.
And as you walk through it.
Right.
But when you go to Coney Island, it's that same feel, that exact same feeling, but instead of being like Latin culture, it's like Russian, Ukrainian,
Slavic
style.
Like you're the Lithuanian store.
But it looks almost identical to Woodside, but instead of being like Latin, it's just Slavic.
Green. The same way Munoxxus described that stretch of like street. Like even though it is all Latino, you will see like the Ecuadorians are here, the Colombians are here, the Peruvians are here, and like you still have like a few countries to go until you get to Central American territory, which is up further to like the 80s and 90s street.
And then all the way at the end, it starts getting Asian.
Yeah.
And you get like Korean, Chinese, Japanese.
I got a little taste of that when I lived in, because I kind of the impetus for this conversation. The last couple years, I lived in Seattle. I got back like 6 months ago, and it was the first time I'd lived in a city. It was the only city that I had any interest in really seeing. I mean, I might go to New York just to see it once, but it's going to be hell because I'm afraid of people. The idea of having all these...
No. There are parts of New York that you would love, and I would just not suggest walking through rush hour.
Don't go to Manhattan.
If people are hell, just don't go to Manhattan.
Don't go to Manhattan.
There's going to be a trail of fucking blood on the cement leading to where I'm curled up in a ball crying.
Just avoid Manhattan and don't go on the subway. If you don't want to go near people.
No.
Oh God!
Dude, don't go on the subway, please. Green, do yourself a favor.
Take a cab everywhere.
Uber's mad cheap. You'll be fine. Fucking and who knows? Strike up a conversation with a cab driver. Cab drivers and people who cut hair know how to run the fucking world. But
when I was in Seattle, I had to use Lyft fairly often because I wouldn't even travel that much, but I obviously didn't have a car. The Lyft drivers and the people there. It was so weird to realize, because you talk to the Lyft drivers and come to understand that almost none of them actually live there. They drive in like the very early morning, get lifts all day, then leave at night. And Seattle was odd because realizing how hard it is to live in a fucking city, unless you're actually rich, unless you're like actually valuable to the system. I want to know how rough that is where you guys are, because you live in a place that has always been a city. I lived in Seattle, which, has also been a city, but they're having a big problem with housing right now. And for a long time, I lived in Boise, which is turning into a city where the housing situation there is such a fucking nightmare that it's almost hard to put into words.
Okay.
Now, hold on. Before we go into that, you talk to Lyft drivers? Holy shit.
Is that bad?
No, I've never had to, unless the Lyft driver's trying to actively have a conversation with me, I'm like, don't talk to me. What are you doing? Just drive.
I didn't even necessarily want them to. It's just a lot of them happen to be friendly and outgoing.
Oh no, when they're friendly, I put my headphones in and I'm like, just drive.
So I am of the school of where, like, listen, because, like, if I take a cab in this city, sometimes I'll try to make, because listen, it's like I don't listen to music when I'm walking around. Like I maybe it's because I'm a sociopath and want to be aware of my surroundings.
Yeah,
but like
let's go with that.
But like Manhattan is a whole different, like, Green. This is gonna sound strange, all right, but I swear to you, there's no other place in the world that, like, on a Friday and on a Saturday night, there is a certain energy in New York City that's hard to articulate. And, like, New York City, like anywhere else in the world, like, anything can happen after midnight, and no good decisions are made after 2 a.m. All right? So, and really, don't go into Manhattan if you hate people. All right?
You have to push through people to walk.
It is, oh, God. So real quickly, before Munoxxus can discuss gentrification, which is what he was supposed to do earlier, but I ran my mouth. All right, the housing problem here in New York City is an equal part of, like, urban blight, which has been happening in Manhattan for a number of years, because, like, Green, even the fucking high-end retail stores that have been propped up for like a decade and a half can't hack it anymore. And if they can't hack it, like, that's like, and on top of that, like, no one wants to bring up when, like, Tiffany's got fucking looted and torched.
That's different. No, that's not a symptom of New York. It's a symptom of the pandemic and the protests.
So, housing. There's been an exodus in cities all across the eastern seaboard into other places. The west version of that is, like, people fleeing California going to places like Texas,
like Idaho.
Like, that's, oh man, I can't.
You don't understand. Among people who who didn't recently move here, Californian is, like, almost a racial slur, because it's been it's becoming a part where a significant portion of Idaho's population are Californians that moved here in, like, the last 30 years. We'll get into that, but you keep going with your thing.
So just real quickly, okay, so here in Queens, we have had a front row to gentrification because certain areas have been gentrified. This is true. However, what I would like to point out is, in Brooklyn, what happened to Brooklyn, all right, now, Green, I can't prove it, but I know this to be true, all right? What happened to Brooklyn was by design. I have never seen a stretch of land in my life, and partially I guess it's because I live right next door to it. I've never seen a stretch of land change and evolve so quickly over time, and there came points of it where it was like watching someone play, like, SimTown and not give a fuck if anything matched. Just like, how much can I squeeze out of every fucking block in, like, Williamsburg, in Bushwick, and even a decade after milking this borough dry, someone decides we're going to do this to Crown Heights, and it happens in, like, a year and a half. What happened in Brooklyn happened by design, and I believe that it was applied, like, after 2000. It was applied elsewhere in the United States and maybe even overseas, but it was fine-tuned, like, because you get instances of, like, Williamsburg, Silver Lake, Portland is the most extreme, weird, mutant version of that, but that's a whole different story. Like, this is
Portland, Maine, right?
There's also Portland, Maine, and, well, there's also Portland, Oregon.
Well, when did you mean?
Like, well, Portland, Oregon, really. I mean, but, like, no one ever brings up Portland, Maine. Good on you, Green.
Oh, okay.
No one ever brings up Portland, Maine. It is going to be one of the last safest places in America if and when the grid goes down. The point is, what happened in Brooklyn happened by design. A neighborhood like Williamsburg ended up being slowly bought out, but it changed because suddenly you had people moving from all over, not just America, but, like, even from overseas. I remember right out of high school, I was working in a grocery store and I was, like, stocking shelves, and it was quiet one day, and I was talking to the assistant manager, this first generation Palestinian American named Ghazi. All right, it's a slow day. We're talking. And this, like, short, like, what looked like a short girl bought, like, a case of beer and put it on the counter. And Ghazi's like, I need to see some ID. And she produces this, like, folded into piece of green paper that was, like, laminated. And he was like, do you know what this is? And I look at it and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And she's like, and she says in, like, a thick Irish brogue, like, it's my driving papers. And I'm like, oh, Ghazi, she's from Ireland. And he was like, oh, okay. And it was like, why? Like, and I didn't want to be a dick and be like, why are you here? It was just like, oh, you're not from like Iowa or Florida, Delaware, Maine, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Georgia, wherever, like just whatever breed of jerk that comes here and then says they're from here after a while.
Yeah.
Like, you're not one of those. You're from fucking Ireland. Jesus Christ. Like, just how does that happen? And it's not just Ireland, it's like other countries around. It's just like, I don't know if there was like some memo that got passed around after 9/11 where it was like everyone moved to Queens because like Brooklyn's getting full. Like,
I want to say real quick, how crazy is it that we were like talking about Lovecraft earlier, and Hanes tells this really tense, soulful story that ends with the horrifying realization that someone is Irish.
Right? This fucking, like, you know, car bombing, pro-Provo, anti-loyalist, fucking crown-hating, like, driving papers, like, fucking cigarette truck hijacking, petrol stealing, like, fucking lady, or fucking driving papers. Like, what the fuck is going on here, Green? And it's not just, it was bizarre. So what happened in Brooklyn, however, was insane because eventually people who owned buildings were propositioned, and there was a lot of money, and a lot of buildings were sold. And on top of that, there were landlords who held out, and they were like, no, I'm going to hold on to my building. And they charged an arm and a leg to people who didn't know any better. So that became the base rent. And then rent from that point in certain neighborhoods have just continued to rise. So Williamsburg, in terms of gentrification, is a perfect example of the cycle of gentrification. Now, before 9/11, starving artists were moving into Williamsburg because it was just like warehouses, Bloods, Crips, and Hasidic Jews. That's it. That was Williamsburg before 9/11. And poor, broke, starving artists, like, you know, moved there because like rent was fucking dirt mega cheap. All right. And most people who were living there were grandfathered into it because it was like old pre-World War II buildings. So then 9/11 happens, and now like Williamsburg is up for grabs, and it's like the Wild West. So then you have these trust fund kids.
But it's everything within a close proximity to Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Brooklyn's the obvious, I think, for most people because it happened so quickly. Like you said, it was,
right.
I don't want to say overnight, but Brooklyn was one of the first places, like Williamsburg, that just got taken over very, very quickly. But even places like the Long Island City border and anything that was close enough to Manhattan that you could get there in 15 minutes,
right,
whether by train or by car, whatever it is, that got bought out by Manhattan. You can even see
very true.
There are companies that went and bought that land out or bought buildings out there, just anything like that. Like my father used to work over right off of Queensboro Plaza, which is, you know, whatever, walking distance to us, but that area used to be one of the lower income neighborhoods. And very recently, that entire stretch of the Queensboro Plaza area, the Queensboro Bridge,
all high rises.
Well, it's all high rises, and it's all taken over by the Manhattan structure, and there are like offices there, and all of the buildings that were warehouses have been taken down and replaced. However, they can't cut that line into the projects. Legally, they can't.
Right.
But what they have been doing is making sure that everything around the projects is too expensive to buy. Supermarkets are charging ridiculous prices. So, we can't get rid of the projects? We'll just drown them.
But and it becomes this like gross war of attrition.
Yes.
Like, all right, so Green, even here in Astoria, you'll start to see places like, an artisanal beer and cheese place, and it's like it's evidently clear that this doesn't cater to people who were born and raised here. Like this doesn't jive with me, and the people you see there are the people who moved here, and it's like this feels kind of like encroachment. And it's like or like organic dry cleaning. Like why the fuck would anyone need that? Just the list goes on. It's just will say this, though, it's this exhausting.
The coffee has improved tremendously. I don't care. The coffee is fantastic.
I'm a little curious about that because I feel like gentrification probably means very different things to me than it does to you.
Wait, Green. So first,
okay,
so this
the
is
coffee.
Okay. So before, what happened in Williamsburg and parts of Brooklyn was this. All right. So First, starving artists move into a neighborhood because rent is cheap, okay? And with it, historically, have been people in the LGBTQ community because, like, they faced housing discrimination. So, of course, if they're going to move to fucking warehouses, Bloods, Crips, and Hasidic Jews, no one's going to look twice as long as you play the fucking rent like clockwork, all right? So, like, that's how New York City was once upon a time. So there were places like Williamsburg where, like, among this population are poor, starving artists. So then, the second generation are trust fund kids and kids who come from money, kids who've never won a day without, and they look just like the broke, starving artists. And those, like in Williamsburg at least, they became like the first generation of like hipsters. Hipsters are funny to me because they were like a weird parody of the working class at first, and then by like 2008, hating on hipsters became like a national, unofficial pastime. The point is, in Brooklyn, the second generation of gentrification were these gross, unfeeling pieces of shit with no redeeming social value. So now, like, they're willing to pay an arm and a leg for whatever a landlord charges. And then the third generation of gentrification are like, you have double income, no kid couples, dinks, haha, try the veal, folks. You have finance types, people who, and it's weird because like 1 out of 5 people who move to New York City, like, you know, either sitting across or telling someone, you're going to hear over here somewhere any night where people are having dinner and it's a date. So what do? I work in finance. 1 out of 5. Like, if there's a bookmaker, I wish there was a bookmaker in Las Vegas where it's just some guy with a GoPro walking to like fine eateries, and I'm like, that couple right over there, like the Indian woman and the white guy. White guy works in finance. Go, walk up. You know, I put like $100 and he works on finance. Walk out with $250. Man, that'd be great. So the third generation of gentrification is like double income, no kids, people who work in finance. It ends up becoming like this really weird money from overseas. Like imagine there was like a Korean grandfather and he was a farmer, and then the son was like a doctor, and then the grandson was like a useless artist propped up by his fucking father. And then you'll have maybe like 11 of those, but you have it for like different like nationalities, and then they move here, and that's like that's in the third generation of gentrification. So then the fourth generation, then before you know it, it's like people but families, and like because it's like hip, but like bastards. You want to have a. It's
just high-income families, though. But at least around here,
of a certain income bracket.
But that's also because at this point, the fucking like the amount to live there has been propped up by so many people who will pay any amount to live in that neighborhood because they
among other
where money
things
comes from. Like, and now you have that aspect of
right. Like, but among other things, you now have people who are like, that building on between 25th and 26th Street on Ditmars Boulevard. Yeah, no, it's mine, and I'm going to raise my family here. And it's like, hi, I've never met you before. Okay.
Yeah.
That happened.
And people who used to live there have been pushed out because the rent just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. Yeah.
Okay.
It happens.
All right. I feel like that was a little. I feel like that was a bit of detail.
What does gentrification mean to you, Green?
The thing about gentrification, which is odd, where it seems like for you guys, gentrification, it is a money thing, but there's also a big cultural aspect to it, where you feel like the neighborhood is losing its character and it's being replaced by a type of person that doesn't appreciate what was already there. For a lot of times in my life, where that's kind of a weird thing, where it seems like East Coast people, like you two, it's this vibrant culture is being smashed out by a new wave of people. In Seattle, it's this weird fucking thing where the people who are doing the gentrification Seattle is so full of shit, where everyone there who is middle class or above is completely fucking delusional. Do you know how many fucking times I've heard people like sit at a table and like rail against how evil Amazon is? Then you're like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a graphic designer for Amazon.
Right.
It doesn't even occur to them they're the ones doing the thing that they pretend to not support.
Oh, you get that here all the time too.
well, it just seems really bad in Seattle, where it's like the default, where it's like you meet working class people who don't live there, and anyone who lives there is like pretends not to be a part of what's happening.
You mean and behind closed doors they play Gatsby with cigars and they clink drinks and they laugh at your misery and suffering and ours by proxy.
I was gonna say, I think as far as like
this guy's talking to masked trash in Queens.
As far as Haynes's approach to, because like obviously money, and I don't want. You mentioned that the whole idea of them taking away the culture. I don't give two fucks about the culture of the neighborhoods here, personally. The culture in fucking New York sucks my balls. And it can go to fucking hell. I'm fine with the nice beer spots and the nice coffee spots and the higher end restaurants. But why the fuck does this shit have to cost twice as much, and why is my rent going up because some assholes moved in? The money aspect of it is fucking wild. Because I've gone to like small hole-in-the-wall spots that have better shit and charge less, and these assholes come in and act like their shit doesn't stink and they make better products, and they fucking don't. They don't fucking do that. But they want to act like they do. That's my biggest problem with it. You want to make the area nicer? Fan-fucking-tastic. Don't drive people out because it's too costly.
So I think, Green. This builds on the class aspect of gentrification in terms of what. Listen. What I find. Listen, I'm Greek and Ecuadorian. All right. So my friend. He's Sicilian and Puerto Rican, and his grandmother made some of the best food I've ever tasted in my life. And like my grandmother made some of the best food. It was like what you considered like peasant food, like tripe soup with like chicken, like that. Like if you're poor and from Ecuador, that's what you eat. And it's weird how like something like pho, catfish, tripe soup, even Sicilian peasant food. Now today, you could go to Union Square and pay like hand over fist. You could pay an arm and a leg for the same kind of fucking food like people's grandma used to eat growing up, but you would have to pay like 4-star restaurant prices for that. Like
for no fucking reason.
It doesn't. It boggles my mind, Green. Like Greek peasant pastry, which is like shredded wheat with like hazelnut and honey, and it's some of the best. And it's baked, and it's and then you could find that in the farmers market in Union Square for like $12.95 a pound. Eat the peanuts out of my shit, disgusting asshole. Like
is that a lot?
That is. Why not just go to a fucking? Do you have a friend who's Greek? Is Yaya alive? Yes. Go to Yaya's house. That's just don't come empty-handed. Don't be a dick about it. Eat that fucking peasant pastry. It's the best thing you've never had. So even like Sicilian peasant food, where it was just like stuffed peppers with like whatever was there, and it's like vegetables and meat, and you could buy that in a farmer's market, and you could pay like you could feed a family of 3 for a week if you want to buy like enough of that for 2 days.
Look at bodegas.
It's disgusting.
Look at bodegas, places where you used to go to get cheap, just like food in general, 25-cent sugar water drinks and a bag of chips and a honey bun and maybe a sandwich, and you walked out of there paying $6 and you had a meal for the day.
Right.
Now you go for a bag of chips and it's $1.25.
Right.
A sweet sugary water drink has to charge $2. The sandwiches are $15 because the place can't afford to stay open with cheap fucking junk food.
It's really it's a little scary where. Through my childhood, I remember the weird unspoken agreement was like a can of soda was 75 cents in a bottle was $1 or $1.25. And then when those prices changed, certain things beyond that started to change. And just like the cost of living and the cost of everything has just continued to go up.
Oh, it's going to keep going
I mean,
up.
not across, evidently, yes, across the country, but to see it in a city and to see it happen but have it be an underpinning of not only certain cycles, but it isn't just happening in New York, Green. It's happening in there's like a pricing exodus in every city. There's also a regular exodus in every city. Like different corners of America with distinct, unique cultural heritages have been strip mined in a way that was ugly by design. It is by design. That's my only argument about gentrification in America. I'd like to believe it's like that overseas because and you know what? You know what's a really weird reoccurring theme? Whenever like a neighborhood is getting gentrified, there's like a coffee spot, and the coffee spot obviously, evidently, does not cater to the locals. But if you look at the paperwork and where it is they register, like it's almost always a real estate company who owns that coffee shop, because it's like an embassy for like people with money. You know what's crazy? And then it brings about really weird, lofty versions of like diversity and multiculturalism. Because like, you know what like fucking diversity is in Brooklyn? Like 5 white people and a mixed race person in a coffee shop that wasn't there 2 years ago. And like diversity in Queens is like you take the 7 train and then like you get catcalled and cursed out in Spanish. No one in little Bangladesh looks you in the eye. And like all the Asian people are very suspicious of you, but like they've got the best produce in the city. Like that's... You know, so even despite the fact that gentrification has hit all of New York City, what happened in Brooklyn is particularly unique and by design. We got off lucky in Queens. I don't think the Bronx will ever be gentrified. It's too...
it's too violent.
They can't handle it. It's a different...
I don't want to be mean when I say this. Is the Bronx like a place with a lot of black people and gangs?
It's black and Latino, and there's been like a growing like population of Slavs.
I've heard people in New York say like, oh, there are neighborhoods with like really entrenched like gang warfare, and you can't go into those. I don't know shit. I'm not trying to be a dick.
No, the Bronx is probably the last place that happens. Staten Island to a lesser extent.
Yes, it does. There are parts of Staten Island that make parts of Brooklyn, even the bad parts of Brooklyn,
the
YMCA.
Brooklyn used to also be... And I'm talking about in the 90s, though, the 80s and 90s. Brooklyn was as bad as the Bronx was.
Yeah, like...
And thanks to the gentrified neighborhoods, now Queens and Manhattan folks slowly went into Brooklyn, and Brooklyn's become safer.
In the 90s, Sheepshead Bay was synonymous with fucking murder and drug dealing, and now it's like a nice, quiet residential.
Next to the beach,
It's astounding. It's bewildering. However, what you mentioned, Green, if you want to see like out and about gang warfare, you could go to Port Morris in the Bronx. That's where that happens.
Just don't go to the Bronx.
You could, I mean, statistically speaking, it's happening right now. Like as all of the listeners are hearing this right now, it doesn't matter. Like 4:13 in the morning, 9:38 in the afternoon, like in the evening. Gang warfare in Port Morris is happening right now. The Bronx is I don't know if it's still the poorest urban county in the nation. It was that for a great number of years. There's a documentary called 80 Blocks from Tiffany's where it shows the Bronx in the early 80s. And the joke is like 80 blocks from Tiffany's, you know, the fancy pants like department store, Manhattan, 80 blocks from Tiffany's, it was the South Bronx.
Yeah.
And it straight up looked like equal parts Mad Max Final Fight. It was just fucking without the motorcycles. It was just so terrifying.
Even people from the other boroughs go to the Bronx for what? The zoo, the Botanical Gardens, and Yankee Stadium. And if you're not going there for that, why are you going to the Bronx?
Yeah. I mean, like...
Okay.
Like, in fact, I had to drive past the Bronx to go to Bear Mountain for my hike this weekend. Mm-hmm. And there was a significant difference in the highway where the second you got next to the Bronx,
loading world map,
like
right?
Shit,
loading world map.
Like the garbage piles were just, there was garbage everywhere. It was just, you could, like you said, loading map, you're passing the Bronx now and it looks worse by comparison.
That in itself is something that's really hard for me to process, where, like I said, I grew up in southern Idaho. Believe it or not, gangs are not a big presence out here. Mm-hmm. And that was something I had to learn at Seattle, where I was not this naive, total guy when I moved to Seattle. But it was a new thing to have to develop that in my head. Like, oh, if you're walking by a guy, like sometimes you can just tell, oh, those guys are in a gang. This is a bad scene. Like, they're not going to fuck with you or anything, but like, I should probably be mindful of that. That was something new for me. It was actually really fucking, it was actually really weird. When I went out to Seattle, the first job I had out there was a security job for the light rail system, which was like the worst working environment I've ever been in. And that's a story for another day, but that is a profound statement coming from me.
Wow.
And it was hilarious to learn about because all the stations were in different neighborhoods. There's this station out there called Tibbs, like Tequila fucking whatever, where it was near this mall they built in a satellite city. where like by far most of the gang violence in the area, not that Seattle was horrible, but most of it was in this area. So we were just told, like, yeah, all these rules we're telling you, when you're on the train stations, you should try to enforce them. Ask people not to smoke, ask people to, follow the lines and stuff like that. If you go to Tibbs, just like, stand there in case someone needs help, but don't try to get people to do stuff or they'll kill you.
Damn.
And it was like they showed us when we were there. There's these big double escalators because it's an elevated platform. It's a stop on the way from the air that goes near the airport, and it winds over this.
It's like a Streets of Rage level.
It kind. I don't know. I assume. When we were there, they showed us going up the escalator, like, oh yeah, see that hole there and see that dent in the metal there? Someone just shot a gun. Not at, we think, but near one of our security guys when they were on this escalator. It was probably just like a local gang initiation prank thing. But yeah, be mindful of people shooting guns sometimes.
Holy shit. I mean, that it happens, but not everywhere over here.
It's slightly bewildering to me how other... See, so here's one thing about growing up in New York City, Munoxxus, and I have had a privilege of, all right? Public transportation, for the most part, was like 24 hours a day. So that spoils you when you grow up, because you end up going to, like, let's say you go to Boston and you're like, wow, your last trains run at like midnight at 1 on like Saturdays and Sundays. Primitive assholes, you uncultured slobs. Who do you think you are? Your calzones suck. And then before you know, but whatever you, like, real quickly, I didn't know there was a Yankees-Red Sox rivalry until I got to Boston to visit a friend of mine from back in the day. And like, I'm a Mets fan. So, like, I had a Mets shirt one day, and it was really, like, after the third, like, yeah! It was like, oh, what the fuck is going on? And my friend was like, oh, there's a Red Sox game today. I'm like, what does that have to do with me? And he's like, oh, you're a Mets fan. Like, I don't know what that means. And he's like, because you're not a Yankees fan. I'm like, well, okay. I just, what a weird one-way inferiority complex, like, that justified me, like, going like, LOL, your trains don't run past 1 a.m. It was just Boston, but it's kind of a beautiful, like, city historically. They've got whatever. I'm
being
just
on
shitting
the trains
on,
late night
like,
at New York is also not a good fucking thing either.
Oh, but you see, but
You shouldn't
Green,
be doing that.
but the reason I bring this up is because, like, for the most part, like, like, you saw, like, okay, this one platform don't do shit, as opposed to like stretches of a train line, like the 2 and the 5 going up into the Bronx. It's like, unless someone is bleeding out or screaming, don't, just keep the trains running. Don't even bother.
Oh yeah.
It's not pretty, Green. And
didn't we have recently, we had somebody who was just, someone hopped on a 2 train and would just pop out at certain stops and just started shooting people, and then got back on the train and rode it a couple of stops and then popped out and shot some people, and the cops were like, what was the motivation? Some guy had a gun, it was on the 2 train.
It was.
Oh, those stories of like dogs that will figure out how to, like, they hop on the train then get off like next to a park. It's like local mass murderers will do this. They just impulsively jump on trains.
I remember seeing in the paper, it was some guy got on the 2 train with a gun and at random stops just shot somebody on the platform. And that was it. And then like 4 people died, and they caught him at the end of the line.
When I worked that fucking job doing the security thing, I think it's Keene Station. There's a couple big underground stations in downtown Seattle, and then the line goes all over the place. And they're gonna branch it out so it goes even more places. But there's a few actual stations, and one is like under 3rd Street. And when I was there being trained for the job, we went to the McDonald's on the corner. And when we were in there, everyone was like kind of looking at me sideways, like squinting their eyes, like, hey, this is a gang hangout. You probably don't want to be here too long or too much, if you know what I mean. And I was looking around like, it's just a fucking McDonald's in the middle of downtown. Like, it's not a bad area of town, is it? And I thought they were fucking with me. Then I quit the job, and like 2 months later, it's like deadly shootout at the McDonald's on 3rd Street. Like 5 people dead, suspected gang warfare. And it's like, what the fuck is... My brain is not built to process that. Like, I've always understood the fear of people killing you. But like when I'm in Seattle, the idea is like, oh yeah, 100 feet from this nice department store, there's a McDonald's where people shoot each other occasionally.
Oh, there are whole stretches of neighborhoods that I'll be walking from one location to another, and like 10 blocks of that walk is just look forward, try not to pay attention to people, don't ask, don't tell, don't like just
don't
go.
make eye contact, just keep walking. It's
And then you get to the neighborhood you want to be in, and okay, everything 10 blocks that way is dangerous, don't go over there. Or you know what, that avenue a block away, don't go to that avenue.
That just leads to why would you walk through the housing projects?
Just don't. Like this place I used to work at, over by the Hudson Yards. Big, nice, newly developed area. Great fucking place. Lots of security. They had snipers on the roof just in case. It was very well developed.
Just in case.
This is true, by the way.
2 blocks away, housing projects, people getting shot up all the time. 2 blocks away.
That's a part of the anxiety around here where, like, people in the area I grew up in, the area that's near Boise, like, they have no real concept of city life. So they're getting nervous because a lot of the people moving here are moving here from shitty West Coast cities that have low quality of life, and they're getting priced out. Where there are like tech companies around here, not big ones, but they're here. So if you're a skilled worker from the West Coast, you can come to Idaho. You have one of the best quality of lives, especially for, raising a family in the entire country. There are satellite cities around Boise that have been named like #1 most livable city like 5 years in a row. And you can move here and they're like, oh, the quality of life is so good. It's, all the problems of city life are not here. But then in moving here, it's becoming an actual urban center. And so the people who are already here are fucking pissed because it's like, we know that in 15 years, we're going to have gangs and we already have congestion, even though by all logic, it fucking shouldn't be.
Really?
And it's frustrating for people here. Yeah, well, it's frustrating for people here where like they see like urban dysfunction starting to creep in and they want to fucking stop it, but they can't. And even though they're building as fast as they fucking can, it's been my entire life like this. They can't keep up with the people moving here.
Well, it's not to say that isn't it like a war of attrition? I mean, really,
in a way, yeah.
It's heartbreaking because you see this like all across the country in some form or another. And like I never thought in my life I'd hear like in Idaho, like evidently there is like gentrification. Like I didn't, but to see like cities around Boise become like, okay, you're not as cutthroat and sociopath enough to work for Twitter, but you work for like a second tier company and you're doing satellite work and you could raise a family like 40 minutes outside of Boise.
Well, as New York and California slowly fall, it'll spread everywhere else.
and that's basically it, where the mentality is it's people who are wanting to walk away from the hellscape and gentrification cycle of the existing urban centers. And the country all over seems to be developing these secondary hubs where people are trying to escape the insanity of the old cities, building new ones in the process, and we don't know where it's going to go. And it's so weird around here. Like, I had to rent an apartment in Seattle. I got very lucky at a few points, my timing was very good. And apartments of similar or slightly better quality here are almost as expensive. And that would have been like unthinkable when I was a child. That housing prices in Seattle and fucking Boise, Idaho might be kind of similar. But, I'm living with friends right now. I'm renting an empty bedroom. The idea of trying to find an apartment is almost unthinkable. And it's almost as bad as when I was living in, one of the principal cities of the U.S.
Oh, welcome to city life.
Yeah.
It's already there.
The only people who say it's good are the people who could more than afford to say it's good.
Yeah. Once you're living on the lower end of it, it's not fun. Hopefully it spreads itself out a little bit more and gets easier.
However, I would like to say, like, on behalf of 718 TV, I've never understood the Eastern Seaboard disdain for the Midwest that is not only prevalent on the Eastern Coast, but evidently, like, on the West Coast, but until, like, I suppose they stop talking about it once they move into your state, But, like, I've never understood...
I don't get it either.
Because, like, people have called it flyover country, and that's kind of like weird because you're writing off like 2/3 of America. So like on the Eastern Seaboard especially, there's a weird disdain for the Midwest, but that's because we're all spoiled slobs because there are cities that dot the Eastern Seaboard, and like once you like move out a little further west, like it's not it's a whole different planet for some people. You know, some people are born, raised, and die and never leave New York City their whole life. Can you imagine that?
No, that's but I can't imagine New York City. Seattle blew my mind to fuck, and that's not close to as big as New York.
Well, all right. What was it about Seattle that I suppose was the biggest shock for someone who went from Idaho to like, this is a big deal city with a sports team and an international...
It was basically the population density, where being around that many people for that long and like seeing that many buildings, you know, in your entire field of view in every direction, and like that, and like city traffic, that was new to me. Where walking on the streets of Seattle, it took me a long time to like let go of the idea that I was about to be attacked at any minute. Because like,
oh my god,
you get used to
it. You would fall apart in Manhattan and you would have a nervous breakdown in the Bronx. Oh god.
Remember the pool of blood comment? Yeah. I was constantly like, I could feel my brain scanning everyone around, and I was kind of in a paranoid phase of my life when I moved to Seattle in the first place, where like being on a street and having like 100 people in front of you and 100 behind you, which I know is not really that many, like that, I could not comprehend that. I lived in Idaho has like less than 2 million people, and like half of the population at least is like within the Boise circle. So there are huge sections of the state that have like literally no people in it.
It was bewildering to see like more than a dozen people within 10 feet around you. All right. And on top of that, imagine if you had to go through that one cross station of like Japan. Like what station is it in Japan where it's like 1,000 people cross that like every 2 or 3 seconds?
I don't know the one in particular. I mean, Japan's stations are way worse.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens here still, too. Like, Japan apparently has it worse on the trains, but that's because their trains are so consistently used.
If Green ever goes to Japan and he goes to, like, a major city in Japan, it's going to be the constant Metal Gear Solid Alert music.
I mean,
because like, it's so cramped.
I wouldn't go.
If you can't handle people... I have times when I go to Manhattan, and like we're talking about just going to pass through areas, and there are so many people moving so slowly that I have to shove people out of my way and like swim through them, and that's just normal. It's not even like, it's not a thought in my head. I'm gonna push through people because they're going slower and they're in my way.
Oh, listen, being born and raised in a city makes you look at people who cannot walk in a straight line or faster than 2 miles an hour or both at the same time as subpar scum. That don't. They don't have the,
get out of the way.
They don't have the privilege to be like.
Seattle is a lot like that, kind of. Like in Seattle, they will like fucking train you, and like I read guides like how to live in Seattle, and it's like walk on the escalators. You have to walk, or let people walk around you. You can't stay. And now I moved back to this area, and I'll be in an escalator at the rare times you encounter an escalator in fucking Idaho. I will like have like fat people in front of me, and I'm like on the escalator. I'm like, why are we not moving faster? This is unacceptable.
Yeah, you're screaming in your head.
Yeah, Seattle people like Seattle people just have like a fucking instinct for like how to physically move through a space. Because people in Seattle tend to be very polite, even if, like, internally they're soulless, like, amoral Amazon dipshits. And, like, they just know how to form lines and shit. So being there for a while, you're so afraid of being caught. Because, like, Seattle has this thing of, like, we're very pleasant, but if you fuck up and disrupt what's going on, we will destroy you. That's kind of how they are. And so they will train you how to like stand in line and like look around when you're in the supermarket and not get in people's way. Then I moved back to Idaho where like you're in a supermarket, the lanes are 20 feet wide and there's people with carts sideways like arguing with their fucking kids, and I want to beat the fuck out of them. Because it's like, you don't understand. You have so much room and you're still fucking it up.
And then it's just people. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you online? And you don't want to scream. And it's just people with no bucket.
I mean, I've cut people online who were taking too long.
Oh, you at some point.
I've gone around them. I'm just like, no, you're fucking, you're dicking around. You lost your spot.
At some point, you have it. Just
carts that are sideways arguing with their shitty kids.
You're not paying attention. I'm going in front of you. If you didn't notice it, it's your fault.
I don't know why I turned into an 80s hack comedian for a second right there, but yes, that is a hard thing to fucking adjust to.
Because even
Green, we do have to leave in a little bit. We're supposed to stream tonight, so just giving you a heads up.
Yeah, I assume we're just going to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's probably the best. We also have to tweet out shit or whatever.
Oh, all right. So
can I say a thing first?
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna fucking say you talked about pushing through people. I can't even comprehend that. Like having people within arm's reach is uncomfortable for me. Having people touch me while we're standing because there's just not enough room. I had to do that a few times. When that happens, I'm like breathing and looking down and being like, don't panic. Don't panic. Don't think about it, because if you think about it, you'll panic. And if you panic, there's nowhere to go. And then it'll get worse. So you need to not... Like, you know those Japanese subways where they cram people in?
Yeah.
Like, if I was in that situation, like the groper thing... I would understand that there, where it's like, I'm not about this, but like, I just need this right now or I'm going to have a panic attack. Maybe that's where that comes from.
I mean, I'll give you
lady, if I don't do this, I'm going to scream.
Yeah. At the spot I used to work at, it was because it was a mall. There were so many people who would just stand in the middle of the walkways with their phone out that I got into a habit of when I went to like move around them and push, I would use my elbows to knock their phones out of their hands out of so they would get the fuck out of the middle of the walkway. That's how bad it got.
You're like a superhero.
It was. I hated it, and I was. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. As I walk away.
I bet you there was some guy somewhere just like smacking iPads out of people's hands like they're lunch trays.
I'm
like,
sure.
People scrolling through their iPad while walking down the street.
Why are you in the middle of the walkway?
This is listen.
Step aside.
Fancy walking is across the street. What are you doing here?
Stand aside and check your phone. Why are you doing in the middle of the path?
Like I said, this turned into a bit of a hacky comedian. I feel like there's probably another version of this conversation to have at a later point. This was a weird podcast. Like the whole first 2/3 was about God and magic. By the way, you slapping phones out of the hands, that's much like the Goo Jeff guy slapping people so they focus on the moment and awaken their spiritual powers. So,
Sure.
I think you're on the side of the angels with that one.
I'll take it. Getting people to focus requires smacking things.
Yeah, this is weird. This has been a great conversation, but we are definitely winding down, and I have a feeling this might be something to talk about, a much later time, a little more.
Sure.
Anything you guys want to say or wrap up? I don't know how you're feeling. If you wanted to introduce a last thing to go out on, you can.
Oh, all right. So before I concede to Munoxxus, so this one time in the Punisher Max, so the Punisher, like, he's bleeding out, and he's like, this is no good. Like, I could only hope someone either gets to me or this is over. And then, like, he closes his eyes, and then, like, he evidently, like, he sees he's got, like, a family and a wife and kids, and he's like, oh no, it's this dream again. And, like, he's got, like, 2 sons and a wife, and, like, he doesn't have the wrinkles around his face. He's got salt and pepper hair, and he's like, I need to snap out of this. I know this is a dream. And then, they're talking, and the whole thing, and this thing is playing out like a moving oil painting, and it's beautifully, like, it's like the life he never had. And then, like the whole time he's just, like, compulsively, like, eating pasta. All right, and he's like, Dad, carbs, and he was like, uh-oh. He's like, this is a dream. And then he wakes up, and evidently he had, like, put, like, gauze, like, on his stomach where he had been shot, and he wakes up, and he's like, all right, I have to, if I don't stitch this up, I die. And then, like, next page, it's page 8. So it humanized him, because, like, it's touching, and he's like, I'm slow. Like, in the dream, he's all like, I'm slow, I'm old, and I'm fat, and it's great. Like, everything I've wanted, it's here. This is a dream. I have to. And he's like, and one of his sons go, Dad, carbs. And then he really like, oh shit, this is a dream. Like, evidently the Punisher is adverse to carbs. That's how he stays so limber. Did not know that.
That's how he stays fit.
He's an aspiration.
I bet you the Punisher can do 5 minutes of jumping jacks.
Yeah,
so subscribe to 718 TV. Follow Munoxxus on Twitch, twitch.tv/Munoxxus.
And Twitter.
Find him on Twitter. And if
Follow
you
718 on Twitter as well, this gentleman.
tell us why you hate America if you don't.
Yeah, do that, please.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, you guys, and really appreciate it. This was kind of a slapdash thing, and you've been really good about rolling with it.
It's our pleasure. Listen, be safe, dude.
I mean, to be fair, we do this every week over on Munoxxus on Twitch, so if you want more of this,
Yeah.
we sit down and we bullshit.
Just
Where it
pick
goes.
if you didn't picture us in masks this whole time, that's your problem. All right.